welcome to the regular meeting of the Multnomah County Board of Commissioners. Audience members, I want to start by asking you to please silence your electronic devices. I would also like to remind you that in addition to the audience in this room, we have people watching and listening online, so please consider your language and comments and testimony today. Today's meeting is a hybrid board meeting. Some presenters and guests will appear in person and some will appear virtually. For those presenting virtually, please mute your mic when not speaking, and when presenting, make sure to unmute your mic and turn on your camera. For those joining us in person to provide public testimony or to present, please turn your mic on when you begin speaking so the green light is showing, and off when you've completed your remarks so the red light is showing. For all presenters, please state your name for the record before speaking or responding to questions. May I have a motion on the consent calendar?
So moved. Second.
Commissioner Singleton moves, Commissioner Moyer seconds. Approval of the consent calendar.
Commissioner Moyer?
Aye.
Commissioner Singleton?
Yes.
Commissioner Brim-Edwards?
Yes.
Commissioner Jones-Dixon?
Yes.
Chair Vega-Peterson?
Yes, the consent calendar is approved.
Opportunity for public comment on non-agenda matters. This is the time for the board to hear public testimony, not for board deliberations. When it is your turn to speak, I will call your name and unmute you or call you to the presenter's table. I will set a timer for 3 minutes when you begin speaking and announce when your time is up, at which point please wrap up your sentence. We have 7 people signed up for verbal testimony and received 5 written testimonies, which were shared with board members and staff. We only have in-person testimonies, so when I call your name, please come up to the presenter table. We have Injured and Pissed Off, Jean Bishop, Troy Preble, and Nikisha Nathan. Come up to the table, please.
My name's Injured and Pissed Off. Nobody is supposed to be above the law, but apparently in Multnomah County, the Board of Commissioners are. With 7 dog attacks on my service animal, Oregon law states that it's against the law to even interfere with a service animal. But of course, the county commissioners at the time wouldn't enforce the service animal laws or even the leash laws or dog brutality or my dog had been injured twice severely, so bad from the dog attacks that he had to limp, and of course he had to get antibiotics, and myself, well, I was kind of inconvenienced because, you know, I don't get around as well as I did with my service animal. I'm legally blind. And there seems to always be discrimination to the blind. Home Forward discriminates against people that are elderly and disabled. And of course, it didn't help much with being with my. I had a broken hip and 2 fractures to my spinal cord the last dog attack, and then even being abused at the OHSU, them standing me up for 3 days with 2 fractures to my spinal cord isn't physical therapy, it's cruelty. And I've never been able to get any justice at all. Of course, that's a state institution. Maybe people will think that it's funny that you can't even put in an AMA, American Medical Association complaint. They don't accept complaints. It's reviewed by the state board, and of course they're going to side with OHSU, with the state institution, and a woman had 3 hip surgeries on the same hip. That's not medical treatment. Hell, that's medical abuse. And that's what I'm stating, medical abuse. Idiots around here. Sandra Otterson ought to be commended with the wifey takes White Whopper, or Wifey White Whopper, ought to be commended for shutting down the OHSU heart transplant program. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. You can, sir, you can go ahead and begin. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Gene Bishop, and I live in Multnomah County, District 1. Let me today start by saying thank you to this board for supporting the local HIV community over the years. Today is National HIV, AIDS, and Aging Awareness Day. Since 2008, September 18th has been set aside to highlight the unique challenges faced by a growing older population living with HIV. I'm 68, living with HIV since age 40, but have been undetectable for many years. For those that might be unfamiliar with the term HIV undetectable, the virus is so low in my body it can be detected by a standard lab test. Plus, it is a proven scientific fact that I cannot pass the virus on to others. Undetectable equals untransmittable, or U equals U. I'm also a client and volunteer of Cascade AIDS Project and a participant of its program Aging Well. But Aging Well is so much more than a program. It is a community, one that welcomed me with open arms soon after moving to Portland in 2020. Aging Well, through social and educational events, resource navigation, and advocacy opportunities, has given me alternatives to isolation and loneliness, which affect older adults living with HIV more so than our younger and HIV-negative peers. While I'm thankful we have medications to manage the disease and make our lives much better than in those early days of the AIDS epidemic, we still have no cure. And one thing many people do not understand, even at undetectable levels, the HIV virus can accelerate the aging process. Even very low levels of the virus can still affect the cardiovascular system, bones, joints, even brain health. With the current administration in DC hell-bent on eliminating funding for HIV organizations or even HIV cure research, today local support for programs like CAPS Aging Well is so much more important than ever before. And if you want to see firsthand how Aging Well supports us, both as a group and as individuals, I invite you to join us at one of our many events, one or more. Maybe a Tuesday morning coffee at Capital One Cafe, Thursday evening happy hour at CC Slaughters. But let me be clear, though, Aging Well doesn't spend money on alcohols, but they'd be happy, just like they do us, they'll be happy to offer you any non-alcoholic beverage that you want. So thank you for your anticipated support.
Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate you coming every year. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Troy Preble, and I work at Cascade AIDS Project. I am the manager of the Aging Well program, which provides a psychosocial model of support for those aging with HIV. And the reason I wanted to come here today is to make sure you are aware of our program and how we support people aging with HIV. We do that by many programs, different programs throughout the year, including mental health and wellness seminars and social aspects of the program, such as Gene mentioned, our weekly coffee and our weekly happy hour and a weekly support group. And then we also do the special events, seminars and things like that. We also do field trips in the summer, all sorts of things. But we are very nervous about the administration coming out of Washington. And so I wanted to just come here today to make you aware of our program and what we do and why we do it. I personally have been living with HIV since 1994. So when I was diagnosed, it was a death sentence. And I still am here. And so I seek to serve those that have the same experience as myself. And it's really just the best way for me to move forward from those years and recover my own mental health as well. So, but that's really all I wanted to say today. So thank you.
Thanks again for being here. Good morning.
Here, let me just set up my timer. Hello, Commissioners. My name is Nathan, and I'm here representing several groups from the Rockwood neighborhood. We have serious concerns about the development at Cook Plaza and are seeking for this development to be moved. A petition has already started and has received over 560 signatures on the change.org website. Firstly, it's very clear that Multnomah County has decided to build this day center in our neighborhood without consulting us, the actual residents of Rockwood. When valid concerns are raised at your first open house, people like myself were actively talked down to by your staff. The disorganization surrounding the services, the unclear number of people it would serve, and the lack of planning made it evident to myself and others that the public input was neither valued nor considered. Instead, the county's process appeared disorganized, secretive, and intentionally fast-tracked. A critical issue is the location of the center. It is down the street from Davis Elementary. I'm talking about a brisk 1 to 2 minute walk. In the past, children were harassed by unhoused individuals who started an encampment on the same street where this development is now being proposed. I'm talking about 5 to 10-year-olds being harassed by grown adults on their way to and from school. And not to mention, that's also the area where the bus stop for both the high school and the middle school is. This situation only came to fruition when the police station and the neighborhood association got together to actually to prevent more harassment. This is a well-known around the neighborhood. This is a well-known history around the neighborhood, just happening 3 years ago, that lasted months and raised serious concerns amongst residents. Neighbors repeatedly raised this issue, especially at the first open house, where the staff dismissed and still insisted this is the perfect site where children walk to and from school every day. The most highly populated basketball court in all of Rockwood is feet away, and also a mini kid park where people say they find needles in as well, right next to the basketball court. And this is the perfect spot, apparently, even though the residents would literally look at you and say, it's not. Rockwood is already doing its part. We already have 4 shelters, and it's proposed 5th, and this would be the largest in a highly populated neighborhood of children. The center, which is expected to house 20 individuals and open its door to over 100 people, which is an odd number to hear because it's made clear that Rockwood has less than already confirmed 25 houses individuals. This poses the question, where are these people coming from and where will they go when the facility closes down every day? It's clear that this is a classic case of lower income or minority neighborhoods often receiving disproportionate shares of services, shelters, and day centers. These clusterings have been criticized in other cities because they create an unequal distribution of social burdens, placing more responsibility on communities that already face economic and social challenges. We urge you to reconsider this development or consider different services. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you.
Next, we have Lynn Ketch, Charlie Sadgast, Malik McKenzie, and Annabelle Rousseau.
Good morning. You can begin as soon as you're ready.
Good morning. I am Lynn Ketch. Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to exercise my civic responsibility. I'm a 24-year resident of District 4, the Executive Director of the Rockwood CDC, operator of the Tower for transitional sheltering in the commercial area of Wilkes North Gresham. I was proud of the presentation that Jones-Dickson and Commissioner Jones-Dickson and his team made. Well done to Anna Plum and her HSD team. It was unfortunate that those most impacted by Cook Plaza development are just learning about the context and her history. But that's on our former elected district leader, decision makers, and city managers. It explains in part why we've had a change in leadership this year. Thank you, Commissioner Jones-Dickson, for representing us well. I have 3 messages to convey. The first is more personal. It's personal is a value of the Rockwood CDC. I have a message of forgiveness. Forgiveness is a personal act, but I am publicly expressing my forgiveness as the offense was public. Your organization engaged with a tabloid and publicly aired your grievances about the Rockwood CDC. An internal memo was shared and emails sent out to our local county cities, East County cities. Our critics smirked. Those who know us are angry, and others are confused, and their distrust of you has been reconfirmed. Respectfully, I forgive you. Second, a message of curiosity about what I heard on Tuesday and in the letter from Chair Vega Peterson. I'm curious that no other cities in District 4 host a county-owned or funded shelter. Commissioner Singleton, I too was around 3 years ago when Lori Stegman was promoting her Resilience Hub to the East County cities. This HSD Homeless Services use of Cook Plaza seems curious to me. Those of us who heard about resilience did not equate it with pod housing, and Lori did not mention it in the meetings I was a part of. Chair Vega Peterson, I'm curious that a HUD grant was submitted with letters of support from organizations I know to be in District 3, and only one in District 4, and it's on the Portland border. Commissioner Moyer, I'm curious about the experience of District 1 and what that means for District 4, and why we need to concentrate services. Can we not learn and do better? Director Plum, I'm curious why your quota deadline drowns out the neighbors' desire for the site use to respect the local elementary school 2 blocks down and after-school care across the street. For all of you, I'm curious if you've seen the space, the floor plan, and how the building constraints could make your contracted provider successful execution questionable. Finally, I live and work in District 4. You are our public servants. You have served. Those you have served have suffered the impacts of your choices and internal processes. Please do it differently. Sell off the building and try again. Please find a community-based solution and engage with the neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Charlie Satgast. As the chair weighs the testimony and findings about Cook Plaza, I would ask that you please be open to some final thoughts from the community. I am both a neighbor who lives a block from Cook Plaza and a staff member at a nonprofit that provides homeless services in East County. Everyone I have spoken to in my neighborhood has expressed concern about the placement of a new HSRC at Cook Plaza. Here are some of the reasons for that concern I've heard from neighbors and local business owners. A busy child and youth activities center is located directly across the street from Cook Plaza at the Salvation Army. Davis Elementary School is only 2 blocks away from Cook Plaza, and many children walk to school on 194th Avenue. Cook Plaza is in the middle of an extremely dense residential neighborhood. The neighbors in the apartments next door to Cook Plaza, many of whom have lived there for years, are so close to the Cook Plaza building they could literally throw a rock and hit the building. Neighbors next to Cook Plaza have struggled with feces, garbage, and drug paraphernalia when Cook Plaza has been used as a severe weather shelter in the past. Gresham has invested millions into the urban renewal of this section of Rockwood, and the proposed HSRC casts a shadow over that investment. Business owners I've spoken to have risked everything to establish businesses in the neighborhood and are worried about the fallout from the proposed center. At the commission meeting on Tuesday, one of the commissioners commented that no one wants a homeless services center in their neighborhood, intimating that therefore it's not productive for the county to engage the community, knowing that the community will simply resist. In reality, the neighbors of Cook Plaza I have spoken to feel betrayed and have lost trust in the county by being left out of the process. Had the neighbors and local businesses been engaged at the beginning of the process, valuable information about the shortcomings of this location would have quickly become apparent. Finally, I don't know how much of the HUD grant has been fulfilled, but we are a sanctuary city and a blue county and a blue state that is in the current federal administration's crosshairs. Any funds that were approved by the prior administration that have not yet been distributed are unlikely to ever find their way to Cook Plaza under the current leadership at HUD. I believe expecting unfulfilled grant funds to be forthcoming is not a compelling reason to stay with Cook Plaza when better locations are recommended in the findings process conducted by Commissioner Jones-Dixon, and thank you again, sir, for doing that for us. Therefore, other options should be pursued for Cook Plaza to be repurposed or sold. Thank you very respectfully for your attention and your consideration.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Malik McKenzie, and I'm representing the Sierra Club. Thank you. Morning. My name is Malik McKenzie, and I'm representing the Sierra Club. I wish I had the time to share every great detail about the climate justice plan, but I would be brief in sharing why this is a work for all involved in its development to be proud of, as well as the communities they represent. This plan has clear and attainable goals based on metrics that matter, and it has been built from the ground up with equity at the forefront. This is not another false solution that will leave some people behind. And to that effect, transparency measures have been included so that everyone can see how their tax dollars will be used and to see the decisions that our elected officials are making. Families will be able to get a reprieve from constant electricity rate hikes through a cap on energy prices that limits increases to being in line with the cost of living and inflation. Low and middle income homes will especially be able to get the help they need to become climate resilient by increasing income limits and discount levels of bill discount programs so that more families get more help that they need. In addition to this, communities will get greater protection from fossil fuel infrastructure by including more of them in the fuel tank seismic stability program, which compels these facilities to assess their vulnerability to earthquakes and develop a plan to minimize risk of damage from earthquakes and secondary effects to employees, surrounding communities, and the environment. The plan even includes making sure children can safely access their local parks with safer street crossings. Lastly, as a lifelong asthmatic, trust me when I tell you that this plan will help. This will help anyone you love that has asthma, COPD, or any other respiratory issues. Many of these goals will quite literally be life-saving, and in more ways than one. But achieving those goals requires a journey, and the first step in that journey is to enact this plan. We have a great opportunity here to do a lot of good for a lot of communities that have been continuously left behind historically. I don't know how any of us here today can look at anyone in those communities and tell them that we truthfully care if we're not willing to enact a plan that has their best interest in mind and which even has feedback from community organizations that are representing multiple BIPOC communities here in Portland and Multnomah County. I truthfully hope that we all have the courage here today to enact this plan and again, quite literally save lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair Vega Peterson and Commissioners. My name is Annabelle Russo. I use she, her pronouns, and I work as the Advocacy Coordinator at Verde, an environmental justice nonprofit in the Cully neighborhood of Northeast Portland. I was also a college to county intern for the Office of Sustainability 2 years ago. I'm here today to testify with immense support for the Multnomah County Climate Justice Plan. Verde, especially my coworker Citlali Torres, who is unable to be here today, has worked with the Office of Sustainability at Multnomah County throughout much of the process of developing the CJP. In a time when extreme heat has led to deaths throughout the county every summer for 5 years, when winter ice storms leave communities stranded without heat and electricity, when marginalized communities face the brunt of toxic air pollution, the CJP envisions an optimistic future where resiliency is accessible and ensured for everyone, even our most vulnerable communities. Verde is extremely grateful to have engaged community members in the Cully neighborhood during the drafting process. Cully residents constantly grapple with poor air quality in comparison to other areas in Multnomah County. Several strategies laid out in the CJP target air quality at the intersection of other goals. For example, increasing the tree canopy improves air quality while also reducing extreme heat, which is another issue close to Cully residents. Our local communities have shared their expertise, and I encourage all of you to steer the county in a way that reflects the community's needs and wants. The CJP serves as a guidepost for the county. Its strategies and values reflect the needs of the most vulnerable populations to climate change as those needs evolve over time. Community-driven, long-term solutions are the only way we will make our way out and thrive in the face of climate change. The county is in a great position to support different levels of management of this plan, from partnering with organizations, making changes in individual constituent lives, and to advocating at the state level. The goals laid out in the CJP directly align with community wants and needs. I hope you all continue to see the value and support the Climate Justice Plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
There's a bit of a mix-up with some names, so I'm going to call Nikisha Nathan one more time. Nikisha. Okay, that's it for public testimony. Oh, Yeah, but we're full. We were full.
She didn't appear. People can just call in and not appear, and that's causing other people not to be able to speak. I'm backup. I signed up as backup.
She was already an extra person.
I'm an extra person.
We already had an extra person go.
So, Tasia, let's let it, there's a little bit of confusion this morning, so let's let him testify and then we'll move on to
Okay,
part one.
sure.
Thank you.
Lightning.
Yes, my name is Lightning. I represent Lightning Superhumanity. We the People, X1, X7, X3333. Now, your system of doing public communication where you allow people to sign up by computer, it's very simple. If they don't want certain people to speak in these council chambers, they just sign up and don't appear. That's why I sign up as a backup to be able to come up here and speak. Now, moving on to my issue is that basically the greatest national threat is the national debt. Now, when the politicians allowed the $37 trillion to be put on the backs of we the people, that was human caused and never should have happened. There should be no free grant money. And I have told President Trump, you stop your grant money. Keep your grants, Trump. I don't want your money. Now, that being said, to President Trump, I do want equity, such as the equity that we the people accomplished at Intel. We are the largest shareholder of Intel. Then we go BlackRock, then we go Vanguard. We are number one, we the people at Intel. That's the way it should be in numerous companies. Into Silicon Valley, for you to allow that national debt to be thrown on the backs of the people is an insult. It's an insult to we the people. And I want that to be paid down. I want Intel to be created and to be made into the most valuable company on planet Earth. I want the startups to be purchased and then subsidiaries of Intel, which again will begin to buy down the debt with the equity that we the people create. If we the people had an equity interest many years ago, and let's say Bill Clinton was able to balance the budget, but nobody else can. If we the people had an equity interest, we'd have no national debt right now, because we would have been selling our portions off to cover that debt. The government was so incompetent to accrue $37 trillion debt and drop it on the backs of we the people. Words can't even, it's just unbelievable they allowed that to happen. We should have had an equity interest, no free grant money, equity interest, and there would have been no national debt. None. Imagine, people, how we would live right now without $37 trillion on our backs. Thank you, federal government. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's all for public testimony. R1, briefing on the public discussion draft of the Climate Justice Plan.
All right, as we have folks making their way down to the dais, I just want to thank our Office of Sustainability for returning us to a conversation today about our draft Climate Justice Plan and to hear an update on the recent months' work that has been full of community engagement. When we set out to create this blueprint in April 2023, our North Star was partnering with those most likely to experience the harms of our climate crisis as partners in creating solutions, to listen, support, co-create, and center those most at risk. In April, the board was briefed on this plan that was being released in our community for public comment, feedback, and input. Today, I'm looking forward to learning more about what has been heard and inform the path that we can chart forward. So with that, I will turn things over to John Waszczynski and the rest of the team to brief us on this. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Commissioners. Pleased to be here this morning with my colleagues to give you some more information about our draft climate justice plan. In April, we briefed the board on the release of the draft action plan. That April meeting really marked the end of an in-depth process of intentional, focused effort to shift our climate planning lens to focus on the communities who are most vulnerable to the climate crisis. The April meeting also marked the beginning of a broader process of gathering public feedback. Today, we're going to be, we're at the beginning of the end, I guess, the beginning of the end of the process of developing this plan. The last phase of iterative plan development with community, with experts in industry, and other environmental experts. And of course, with you, the members of the board. Next slide, please.
Get the slide up.
Oh, sorry. Didn't even notice the slide deck wasn't up. Sorry about that. And then the next slide after that, please. Okay. So I'll just go on. Today, you'll hear from my colleagues in the Health Department about the overlap of climate planning and public health, from one of our steering committee members about her perspective of developing the plan, the draft plan and the thinking behind it, and from me and my teammate about what we have heard and the next steps we envision for this process. So with that, I'll turn it over to Brendan.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Brendan Haggerty. I'm the Healthy Homes and Communities Manager in the Health Department. I'm going to start by just reminding us all of some of the ways that climate change is impacting the health and well-being of Multnomah County residents. When we began climate and health planning 15 years ago, climate change still seemed like a future problem. But now we have sweltering summers and smoke-darkened skies that remind us that climate change is here. And in very impactful ways, climate change is resulting in illness and premature death in our community. Sometimes this is directly through heat illness, injuries, or property damage from severe weather, and other impacts are less obvious or less direct, like threats to livelihood, the slow-moving damage to our ecosystems, and the mental health impacts of experiencing or witnessing the many harms of climate change. These harms come first and worst to what we call our frontline communities, often folks who have contributed little to the root causes of the problem, but who are bearing the heaviest part of the burden. These include many groups who have been marginalized or experienced harms from systemic racism. We see disproportionate impacts among older adults, low-income residents, veterans, youth, and others who are part of environmental justice communities exposed to the products of fossil fuel combustion. Next slide, please. I want to touch now on some specific health risks that we're seeing in Multnomah County. We've just marked the 5th anniversary of the day that Portland had the worst air quality on Earth during the 2020 wildfires, sending hundreds to emergency rooms with respiratory illness. The memory of the 2021 heat dome and those we lost that summer comes back every time we have a heat wave here. And we are gaining a better understanding of the mental health impacts of climate change, especially among our youth. I want to point out a special role for the county. As our local public health authority, we are accountable for some of these impacts, and we have to report on them regularly to the state. To get improved outcomes, we apply tools from our public health toolkit like epidemiology and assessment, emergency preparedness, risk communication, and a focus on health equity and cultural responsiveness. On this slide, the top 3 impacts are the ones we're accountable for to the Oregon Health Authority: heat, wildfire, and mental health. But beyond these, there are many other climate impacts on health that we are tracking and working with partners to address. And on the bottom are a few examples. The habitats for disease vectors are changing. This is the 2nd year in a row that Aedes aegypti, the mosquito that carries dengue fever, has been detected in Oregon. And this year, our neighbors to the north in Tacoma, Washington, detected the first known locally acquired case of malaria, a disease carried by another mosquito. We have watched as heat and drought create the conditions for toxic, harmful algal blooms to emerge on the Willamette River. And in addition to these downstream health effects from climate change, there are also direct harms from fossil fuel combustion, which include leading causes of death like cancer, heart disease, and respiratory illness. And of course, all of the impacts that we see on the slide now are not equitably distributed. On the next slide, I'll conclude by just emphasizing our role as the local public health authority. You may have heard my colleagues in the Public Health Division of the Health Department use the term public health modernization to talk about the process to update the way we provide governmental public health services in Oregon. As part of this, the legislature has defined the functions of local public health authorities and funded us to fulfill those functions. Among those functions is addressing what many public health experts call the greatest public health challenge of the 21st century, climate change. In this elaborate graphic, you can find it down at the bottom, about 6 o'clock. And so in recognition of this and based on our long history of climate planning, the Public Health Division devoted significant resources to community engagement and development of the Climate Justice Plan. And I want to especially acknowledge my colleague Jay Raj Singh, who's led our involvement in this and led the Health Department's contribution. I also want to thank the Office of Sustainability for being indispensable in this work. As is often the case, public health can't achieve our work on our own. And we rely on, just like we rely on the Water Bureau to help keep our drinking water healthy and our parks agencies to make safe places for physical activity, we need partners like the Office of Sustainability to coordinate and champion climate action that protects health. And I'll pass it back to them.
Thanks, Brendan. Can I have the next slide, please? So, as you can see from the slide, Multnomah County has a long history of engaging with climate planning, over 25 years, as a matter of fact. In many ways, the history of climate action at Multnomah County is born out of a sense of frustration with the lack of action at the federal level. And really the past boards have really championed the concept of thinking globally but acting locally, finding ways that Multnomah County can gain purchase in the conversation about climate change, learn by doing, and develop practices that can make a meaningful difference in both protecting communities and in reducing emissions. Just to kind of highlight this, the resolution in 2017 that called on decarbonizing our energy systems, that was passed by both the Board of County Commissioners and by the City Council, was adopted here in this room on the very day that the Trump administration, the first iteration of the Trump administration, pulled us out of the Paris Climate Accord. That continues, so today, as we consider the latest iteration of our climate plan, we again are facing headwinds, from the federal administration. But I think that sort of highlights the importance of this local level planning in order to make sure that even if the federal government's not going to take action, that we at the local level are responsive to what we're seeing on the ground, the needs of our community, and take responsibility for what we can in this global fight for a climate stable future. Next slide, please. Planning has not been our only activity. We have actually, as I mentioned, learned by doing. The Office of Sustainability and many of our colleagues around the county have been substantively contributing to climate action at the local level. These include advocating for policy changes at the statewide level, like stronger air quality protections and low-income energy rates, utility rates, developing innovative programs to make investment in renewable energy and energy efficiency easier for commercial building owners, working at the forefront of understanding how climate change is impacting public health that Brendan just talked about. These are only a few examples, but I hope they serve to show how the county can have an impact in a variety of ways across a wide variety of domains. Next slide, please. As I suggested at the start, our deliberate focus at the outset of this process was to center the perspective of frontline communities who experience the impacts of the climate crisis first and worst. So this wasn't the end of the process, but it was the beginning of the process. We launched the steering committee out of our Climate Justice by Design partnership and consulted with partners who have deep roots in the community to help us develop this group of experts that formed our steering committee. We also had our partners in public health, Jay-Raj and Brendan and his team, the City of Portland, the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, and our internal Multnomah County subject matter experts in the climate leadership team. This was the phase of the process where we took out the zoom lens. to begin our work of talking to people who don't typically get included in climate planning. And we're going to hear a little bit more about that from Monique. But before we do, I wanted to pass it to a member of the steering committee to really give you a front row perspective on what that process of developing the draft plan was like. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Desiree Eden.
Morning.
Good morning, and thank you. Good morning, commissioners. My name is Desiree Eden Ocampo. I use she, her pronouns.
Oh, sorry, next slide, please.
And I am the executive director of Rahab Sisters and a member of the steering committee for the Climate Justice Plan. Rahab Sisters is a community-based organization along 82nd Avenue and the I-205 corridor. For 22 years, we've been on the front lines offering community connection with some of the most marginalized people on the East Side. Our mission is to build community through radical hospitality, and particularly with women, trans, and non-binary folks marginalized by poverty, houselessness, sex work, drug use, and violence. Some of you may know Rahab Sisters for our work in shelter placement, housing navigation, and eviction prevention. You may know Rahab Sisters for our day center, clothing and supply services, hot meals, and our restaurant-style signature dinners. You might know Rahab Sisters as a decades-long partner of the county's behavioral health department for syringe exchange and harm reduction, or as a vaccine site, or for our street outreach and field engagement, especially during the height of the COVID pandemic, to offer mental health support and survival supplies. You may be familiar with Rahab Sisters playing our part in mobilizing the county's severe weather emergency response. Or maybe you don't know us yet, but have heard from other community organizations and nonprofits who provide services such as pro bono legal work, healthcare, cosmetology, somatic and fine arts-based therapy, mental health support, education and workers' rights, trans rights, and tenants' rights, just to name a few. That Rahab Sisters is one of the places they locate their services. And by no means, that's an exhaustive list of what Rahab Sisters offers, but I did name them to help paint a picture of what a holistic approach to community resilience looks like, and to imagine a community serving resilience hub. The Urban Sustainability Directors Network defines resilience hubs as community-serving facilities augmented to support residents, coordinate communication, distribute resources, and reduce carbon pollution while enhancing the quality of life. And as a founding member of the East County Resilience Hub Network, Rahab Sisters plays a larger long-term role for the quality of life of Multnomah County residents. We provide an opportunity to effectively work at the nexus of community resilience, emergency management, climate change mitigation, and social equity, while also providing opportunities for communities to become more self-determining, socially connected, and successful before, during, and after disruptions such as severe weather, fire, flood, and other natural disasters. And this brings me to our participation in the steering committee of the county's Climate Justice Plan. Next slide, please. It was a humbling experience to be counted among our region's 14 leading and well-respected organizations to work together to draft a climate justice plan. With varying points of view, a myriad of challenges faced by the communities we each represented that seemingly competed for attention, resources, and action, to the daunting task of crafting a plan that would benefit all Multnomah County residents, not just a few. Several of us committee members cautiously entered this process. We, and especially me, were not interested in investing our time and energy and expertise for a process that would not affect real change for the Multnomah County residents living in communities that are most immediately and most severely impacted by climate change. Thankfully, the steering committee did not have to start from scratch. Much of the groundwork had been laid by another group of community leaders, government staff at Multnomah County's own Office of Sustainability. We were provided with a community-driven climate justice framework rooted in values and guided by vision, And that framework uplifts collaborative governance that is equal parts equitable government and community governance. And most importantly, it defined what climate change means. That with climate change root cause being an economy built on the over-extraction of natural resources and exploitation of human labor, climate justice addresses the impact of this economic system that creates not only society dependent on fossil fuels, but myriad concurrent injustices within the Black, Indigenous, and other communities of color, and communities with the least power and resources. The work of the steering committee was slow, deliberate, and took seriously this 35-page framework that we were provided, unlike any traditional planning methods most people are familiar with. We developed and employed a consensus building process with a goal to use the power of authentic dialogue to collectively develop the best possible solutions to a shared challenge for the common good. Commissioners, the climate justice plan that you have before you addresses systemic issues that goes beyond just climate action to tackle root causes. It spurs collective action, providing a community toolkit, and encourages creative solutions not only from individuals or demands made to corporations, but also from government. It builds collective power that fosters partnerships for projects and advocacy. The diversity of experience of the steering committee is a strength that was harnessed to create this climate justice plan that will lead to better outcomes for all Multnomah County residents in all socioeconomic levels. And finally, let me share a story from one of our 2.5-hour-long committee working sessions. We were months and several meetings into the process. The county staff charged with this task presented the committee with a draft plan based on our discussions and many work groups. It was a direct and clear plan, well-researched and detailed. It was a familiar plan, albeit with audacious goals, but it completely missed the mark. It did not prioritize nor demonstrate how such a plan would improve the day-to-day life of a single mother working 2 jobs, caring for a father with a chronic respiratory illness from years of living next to the freeway, whose children would have to go to school where no sidewalks exist, and she would have to now take public transit with the nearest stop a mile away because she had to choose between paying for rent or paying for car repairs so she doesn't risk eviction. In other words, the plan we were presented took a traditional approach through the lens of industry and the economic systems that cause pollution and environmental harm. It was a one-dimensional plan that did not weave the real reason for why we need this plan in the first place. You and me and everyone in this room and in the building, inside this building, and everyone outside, your children and your children's children, we are the very reason, and that's what's at stake if we do not follow this plan, and if we don't remember that that is the reason for this plan. And with credit to the county staff, they listened to the steering committee, and we started over. Commissioners, what you have before you now is a climate justice plan where you can ask yourself, how have I been harmed by climate change, and how will I personally and my community benefit from this plan? And have the solutions before you. This is a courageous, bold, and multi-layered plan born out of creativity, expertise, lived experience, and community engagement. And I now pass it on to my colleagues to talk about those details.
Great. Thank you, Desiree Eden. Next slide, please. So as we heard from Desiree Eden, the process was different, and the plan looks different as a result. So rather than having traditional sector-based chapters that really look at individual industries or individual emission sources, the committee really pushed us to have a plan that starts with the vision that we have for our future, a shared vision. And that's where these 12 goals come from. The 12 goals I think of as a guiding constellation that we can navigate by towards the horizon of climate justice. And to me, they embody sort of a real leap forward in climate planning. Next slide, let me explain why. So in our 2015 Climate Action Plan, which at the time was noted as one of the best plans in the entire world, we had essentially one outcome measure, whether or not emissions were going down. And beyond that, we can measure outputs. Were the actions identified in the plan being accomplished? Yes, no, maybe. With this plan, rather than just having one-dimensional outcome, we have a multidimensional set of outcomes with measures attached to each of them. We all know that a goal is only as good as the measures you use to judge your progress. So our plan would be to, once the plan is finalized and approved, would be to provide regularly reoccurring reports on the progress using these metrics attached to each of these goals. Of course, we also need strategies. The strategies help us map out short-term actions and near-term actions that we can take to try to advance the progress towards those goals. The strategies are, were really envisioned as a toolkit that the community and the government could use and collaborate on in order to find opportunistic opportunities to advance the strategies as circumstances allowed. We'll talk more about what we heard from the community, but before switching to that, I just want to turn it over to my colleague Monique so she could talk about this a little bit more about how we went beyond just the steering committee for the process and how we conducted our public outreach after the draft plan was released.
Good morning, Chair, Commissioners.
Next slide, please. Sorry.
My name is Monique Smiley. I'm the Sustainability Engagement Specialist with the Office of Sustainability. For our 2024 Community Engagement Strategy, we focused on 4 key areas. Inclusive participation. We ensure diverse representation and ownership from the most impacted communities in Multnomah County. We connected new learnings to people's lived experience and found shared problems that could be addressed collectively. Actionable outcomes. We prioritized opportunities for shared analysis of the problems and barriers people are facing and established a process to reflect on actions and refine solutions as needed. Leveraging existing knowledge. We utilized existing work and knowledge from past engagements to avoid redundancy and community fatigue. We also fostered a multidimensional understanding of what power means, political, economic, and cultural, and educated people at the hyper-local level about the county's operations. And authentic relationship building. We created a space for people to share their cultural wealth and knowledge. We also helped people identify the unique role they play in addressing shared challenges, fostering a sense that everyone has a valuable contribution to make. And we intentionally designed our community engagement process to go beyond the typical channels and to broaden our partnerships. We met with the entire steering committee regularly, but we also met one-on-one with committee members to help ensure that the process was working for them and that they had the information that they would need to feel ready to participate. And as you heard from Desiree Eden, steering committee members pushed us to go deeper with our engagement and broaden out to other groups and individuals in the community who also had a perspective on climate justice. We prioritized engaging with environmental justice communities, those most impacted by climate change. This included young people, immigrant and refugees, social service providers, older adults, and residents from some of the most disadvantaged areas in the county. These are community members who are not usually included in government planning, let alone climate planning. We brought these conversations back to the steering committee, and the information helped us move from high-level values and vision to developing goals and potential strategies that would directly benefit the communities we were engaging with. The steering committee guided us beyond the traditional climate planning mold. We focused on people-centered universal goals and aimed to have strategies co-designed by the people who are furthest from achieving those goals. Our collaborative planning process was central to developing a new approach for climate planning. This process was intentionally non-transactional, helping us to bridge the gap between the community and the government staff. Many participants, some for the very first time, felt excited about climate justice and a stronger connection to the county's work and what we do. They also left with a better understanding of how to access the county's resources. People were empowered to share ideas and identify potential solutions, understanding the different types of actions that we could take together to address the community's immediate needs while making the difference in the fight for a climate-stable future. Next slide, please. In phase 2, to borrow from John's metaphor in the beginning, if during the first phase we zoomed in, during the public comment period, we used a wide-angled lens. In phase 2, our goal has been to hear from as many county residents as possible. Our key activities included developing shared messaging and communication materials, launching an online feedback portal to make it easier for people to submit comments, hosting 2 public listening sessions, delivering presentations at meetings we were invited to, and convening a utility roundtable to gather technical insights. As you can see, our efforts resulted in 24 events, 46 survey responses, 597 in-person connections and conversations, and although it says 39 written comments, we already have had several more this week, so 42 written comments, including those from in-person events, emails, and formal letters. We plan to meet with these groups for more in-depth conversations on their recommendations. And then just this last week, we engaged with over 40 community members at the Coley Fest and connected with 30 members of PEACE. PEACE stands for Public Employees Act for Climate Emergency. This is a peer-to-peer network of climate emergency responders. And then this upcoming month, we started meeting with urban designers and architects to discuss climate resilience and the climate justice plan. And I also want to give a shout out to Commissioner Singleton and her staff. We look forward to partnering with you for an event during Sustainable Building Week next month. Most importantly, this work is ongoing and we're eager to keep building on our progress. We continue to expand our outreach by collaborating across multiple county districts. And we're always seeking new ways to collaborate and welcome the opportunity to co-host events with each commissioner. We are also eager to hear your recommendations on who we should connect with in your districts in the next phase. I will now pass it back to John to share what we heard. Thank you.
Thanks, Monique. Next slide, please. So with all those comments that we received, we went ahead and sort of categorized them in terms of support, and by and large, we saw a lot of support in the community. A lot of people who wrote and said, hey, we actually want this plan to go further. Some urged caution and had specific issues that they wanted us to address before finalizing the plan. Next slide, please. One theme we heard over and over was support for the concept of climate justice. Community members, even those who were most skeptical about some of the strategies within the plan, applauded the focus on climate justice and voiced their support for a plan that was going to center the needs of frontline communities. Next slide, please. But of course, we also heard constructive feedback. Much of that feedback some of the more critical feedback talked about how is the county going to prioritize specific strategies in a time of budget constraints? How relevant are the strategies to the span of control of Multnomah County? How feasible are strategies based on the pace of transition within the energy system? So these are areas that require additional work on behalf of staff and our partners. If we can go to the next slide, please. So let me lay out for you what is our proposed strategy. What's our proposed strategy, in this last phase of planning. So, we are here engaging with you today. After this, we're proposing to do 12 community forums, one focused on each of the goals, to make sure that we're hearing from partners, whether they're in industry or environmental organizations or just community members, to make sure that the metrics and that the strategies within each of those goal areas are going to be relevant, effective, timely, and measurable. We also want to ensure that as we refine those strategies and metrics, that we have an opportunity to evaluate them as staff using our expertise about the readiness to move forward on those strategies, the cost, and make sure we're presenting to you an ambitious but realistic plan to address the root causes of climate change in our community. Before we finalize the plan, we want to engage the board again in a work session so that those revised the revised metrics and strategies can be talked about by board members during a work session, and make sure that we're responsive to the feedback we get so that we can bring to you a plan that is ultimately going to be, once again, vetted by our steering committee members, but hopefully something that you're ready to lend your support to. So that, in a nutshell, is what we're planning on doing. And if we can just go to the next slide. So this is our last slide. And, you know, we heard from Brendan, the climate crisis is dire. Unfortunately, global emissions continue to rise, even as our emissions locally decline, which is a good thing. But there is good news. The solar energy combined with battery energy storage, wind energy, is the cheapest energy ever, period, right? So all of a sudden, the renewable stuff that we used to have to pay extra for is actually the energy that's going to solve our energy problems as a community. This Sunday, activists from around the country are going to be gathering in a day of action that they're calling Sun Day, which is a day of supporting the development of these renewable resources throughout the country. So even though this challenge is great, we have an opportunity as a community to embrace solutions that, as Desiree Eden was saying, can benefit everybody. So with that, we'll stop, and we're happy to answer questions that the board may have. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate everyone being here today. I know there was a lot of, I can see folks in the audience as well who are here, who were a part of this work, so thanks everyone for being here. We'll go to the board for questions. We'll start with Commissioner Singleton.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for the presentation and all the work that's gone on behind this. And I know not all the community partners are in this room, so I just want to thank them as well. I know this has been years in the making, so that's been really, really cool to see how much you all have engaged folks. I really want to appreciate the vocal support that I've heard from community throughout this process that you all have been running, and really looking at collecting the feedback and taking some qualitative input to really shift what you might have in the plan and how some of the strategies show up. When we're doing community plans like this, I think everybody knows I'm very invested in community being engaged, and so look forward to continuing to work with you and make sure that other folks in D2 are engaging, but I also appreciate seeing how much they did throughout this public comment process. Many of my comments or questions are going to relate to how we take these community goals and implement them, whether they're county controlled projects or Metro or the state. I also want to acknowledge that there's a call out in the plan about AXI, and I'm not going to pretend to know the acronym, so I'll look to you for that one, should really provide some of that oversight and looking at the implementation. That group is really powerful, and I've really appreciated the time that I've gotten to spend with them and learn from their expertise. I think it's really important that we look at how this connects with other plans. And so I wanted to start, Director, with a question around JPAC this morning. We heard from Metro about their climate plan, and it was stated that their work relies on other city and county plans. Apparently 7 counties are included in theirs. And I would love to know if you could tell us a bit about how our work aligns with Metro, not only in creating the plan to date, but also moving this work forward and how you see that interaction going.
Thank you, Commissioner, for the question. So as you mentioned, Metro, for the first time, has really engaged in the development of a comprehensive climate action plan. The funding that has enabled them to take that process on has come from the federal government, the last administration, the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program, I think it was, gave each of the largest metro areas in every state $1 million to develop a comprehensive climate action plan for the metropolitan service area. That's why we have that 7-county area that spans not only Oregon, but also Washington. And we've engaged in the process. We're one of the 7 communities, or more than that really, because we have the cities within the counties as well participating in the development of the plan process. We've presented on the climate justice plan during that plan development process and provided our feedback on the technical analysis. One of the really valuable things that plan I think is adding to the conversation about climate planning for us is that they had the funding to engage a consultant group that could really look at strategies, their cost effectiveness, in terms of dollars invested versus emissions reduction, and really understand that level of detail about the readiness and ability of local governments to take this. They also did something that we call a wedge analysis, which is to stack up all the policies that exist at the statewide level, the policies proposed in the plan, and see what kind of emissions reductions those lead to, and whether or not those emissions reductions would total the amount necessary in order for us to reach our climate goals by 2050. There's a gap, and that's one of the really important things that we learned is actually there's a gap, even with state policy, even with the policies proposed in this regional strategy, there's a gap. And the other important thing that we learned is that most of the emissions in that 7-county area come from the 3 counties, the 3 large metro counties here in Oregon. So I'm hoping that Metro is going to continue to engage climate practitioners from throughout the region, and that we have a space where we can continue to compare notes, identify promising practices, and to the extent Metro has controlling authority over transportation dollars or land use planning or solid waste planning, materials management, that they're going to be able to use this plan to help inform how that authority is used going forward. I think what our plan really adds to the conversation is that really deliberate, intentional focus on frontline communities that they didn't have the capacity for in their planning process, just based on the timelines they had and the way in which the federal grant dollars were dictated. And so we were really able to bring in that on-the-ground perspective, grassroots perspective, that I hope is going to help inform their vision of climate action. So I think there's a really good conversation going on between the 2 plans.
Thank you. I really appreciate folks seeing kind of that bigger landscape and how our plan is a part of a larger conversation as well. I would say I think it's also a great opportunity with that convening that they do to look at where we can come together on a state advocacy agenda for the things that we don't control locally. So let me know if I can be helpful in advocating with Metro for that as they pull those convenings together.
It's a great idea. Yeah, thank you.
There is, so how do you see the county partnering maybe with cities, Metro, or the state to address strategies in this plan that are not under county purview?
Thank you for that question. As I kind of alluded to in one of my slides, we are often in the position of being able to leverage the county's experience as a frontline service provider or a public health agency in order to bring that perspective to a state regulatory process or another government's climate plan or their policy agenda. And I brought some examples, but maybe I'll just lean on one recent example, is that we identified a gap with our Department of County Human Services in the amount of funding that was available for low-income energy assistance. And within the plan process, we noticed that when we talked to community, energy affordability was a major theme that came through. And it's not enough to have renewable energy. We have to have renewable energy that people can afford. And when we heard about this gap, we were able to work with our government relations team. A bill got passed, actually doubled the amount of funding statewide, and will double the amount of funding available in Multnomah County through DCHS to assist low-income families. So that's just like one example of how we can kind of come together around a shared, like you were saying, a shared advocacy agenda. But maybe I'll just turn it over to Brendan and just talk about some of the heat mapping analysis and how that can also lead to on-the-ground action.
Yeah, we've had some good examples of that already, and I think what I see on the horizon is a deeper level of collaboration forthcoming. I think one that I can point to from, I think this was last year in Wood Village. After we collaborated with our neighboring health departments in Washington and Clackamas counties to map heat islands across the whole region, we identified a hotspot in Wood Village. And shortly after releasing the data, we were contacted by a city manager there. John helped us arrange a meeting between the city manager there and our weatherization program in DCHS. Between April and July, I think we were able to direct resources from the weatherization program to have several dozen heat pumps installed in mobile and manufactured housing there, which is, quite nimble for that group of organizations. That's the kind of thing we're trying to replicate over and over going into the future, and I think we're starting to be able to be more systematic about it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So some of the strategies, not to harp on this, but there's some as well that indicate funding needs at Multnomah County. And I assume at future action of approval of this plan will not be taken as a funding commitment for any specific fiscal year, but rather I would expect to see it as proposals in your budget for this board or future boards to deliberate and decide on in their budget processes. Is that aligned with how you're thinking about this approach?
Yeah, that's correct. I think it's typical for us to identify potential actions in a strategy like this or a plan like this, and then, for example, like a Vision Zero or goals around housing and homelessness. We identify ambitious goals, we identify specific strategies, and then it's up to the nitty-gritty of budgeting and grant writing and staff time to make those strategies into reality. And I think Commissioner Brim Edwards has brought this up to me, is that we really need to understand, the board needs to understand sort of within the context of the plan, like, are these very expensive strategies, or are these things that, are maybe can leverage other opportunities and not be expensive, but have a big impact. And, sometimes a strategy or developing a program can be relatively cost effective. I'll just point to what we call Property Fit, which is a program that's aimed at making investments in renewable energy and energy efficiency easier for commercial building owners. We devoted a lot of staff time to that program, but through a partnership with Prosper Portland, we didn't actually have to invest any actual budget dollars beyond staff time, which is obviously an opportunity cost. I don't want to downplay that, but we didn't have to invest dollars over and top, because actually what that does is facilitates private investment into private property. So there's, I guess I'm just trying to say that there's innovation that we can look to, and there's also grant opportunities that we can look to. Maybe a little bit less so with the current administration, but hopefully in the future there'll be more of that.
Absolutely, thank you. And I think lastly, I'll say that Commissioner Jones-Dixon and I just wrapped first phase of our workforce table with the manufacturing trades. The idea is for phase 2 to be about agriculture and green jobs. So I would love to really partner closely with you and your team as we pull that table together and think about not only who's there, but how to design a process that really gets us some good, clear implementation opportunities, because we want to get folks into good paying jobs. And I know you have some expertise, not just in your office, but also on your advisory council, as well as with all your community partners. So I look forward to that work in the near future.
Me too, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Brim Edwards.
I join Commissioner Singleton. Thank you for the presentation and the work that led up to today, both for the county staff and also all the community partners. Really appreciate it. And I don't have a lot of questions. I appreciate also getting all of the public comment that we've received to date, and having read through that, I'm going to be interested in seeing how that gets integrated, or how it pressure tests parts of it. If it's comments that are reflective of things that people, they're not just supportive comments, but maybe like, here's something that we would propose changing. So I'll look forward to sort of that next iteration and then how that's going to come forward. I really appreciate the pre-conversation we had, John, about the how this plan interacts with things, or within the plan, what things the county controls and what things we may want to influence, but we actually don't have control over. I love the goals. To me, they really speak to what, as a community member, that I would want to see for my community as it relates to climate. One of the measures that I'm going to pressure test it, the plan against, is something that is really specific to my district, which is so the lack of tree canopy, the heat islands that run down 205 and 82nd. I'm glad to see some changes are being made on the 82nd to increase tree canopy and I think it make it less of a heat island, but that's very specific to my district. And I know this is a county-wide plan, but that will be something that I want to see. And this is just, I'm going to repeat something I said the last meeting, because the next iteration, I really would love to see some sort of demarcation between the things that the county controls or has the ability to like deeply influence, and those things that we're, advocates with a lot of other community members, but it's somebody else's like core competency or a core service or where they have jurisdiction over. Because from my perspective, and this is sort of informed by my work helping design the Portland Public Schools Climate Action Plan and Justice Plan, which has turned out to be a model for the nation, but we were very clear about the things that we can control and then measuring it, because, for example, take something that we don't control, and we're spending a lot of time to attempt to influence it, and at the same time something we control, and I'm going to use the motor pool example, that we still have mostly gas vehicles. I think we doubled them from EVs from last year to this year, from 2 to 4, or maybe it was 4 to 8, but it's still a small percentage. Is that I'm really going to want to be laser focused once we have an approved plan on the things that we can control and that we're accountable for, that we can improve. And I think it's challenging when we have a really long list of strategies. So I'd love to somehow, and this is just how I organize my thinking, of being really crystal clear about what the county is accountable for and what we can change, because those are the things we should drive hard. Not that we're not working on the other items or that we aren't going to be part of a broader coalition, but really we need to demonstrate that we're walking the talk and we're taking the action on the things that we can take in action, not just telling other jurisdictions or others to do something that, while we as a county haven't done our own work. So I think there's multiple ways to do it. I think last time you mentioned a community toolkit. It could even be, just the strategies are in different colors. Or you have the one pager or the two pager of like, here are the county specific strategies, just separated out so we can hold ourselves accountable for the things that we control. So I look forward to sort of the next steps in the process about like how that might be formatted or structured. Then the other issue I think that we should take into consideration as we move forward, and I'm interested in how you might be thinking about this, but clearly some of the strategies have, from the ones that we own or control and the ones that we don't, have some sort of cost impact. And I am interested in how that will show up. So I'm curious if you have initial thoughts about that particular piece of sort of the next step, because currently we have a plan that doesn't have costs, and again, using the motor pool as an example, that has a cost, or it may be that something that the counties, that another jurisdiction controls has a cost, but we haven't outlined it, or maybe it has a cost just to the, like individual residents. So I don't know if you want to share how you might be thinking about that.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner, and thank you for offering your expertise from Portland Public Schools. Indeed, those are really excellent strategies and plans focused on not only their investments but also the pedagogy of the district. So it is really inspirational, and I definitely will be wanting to talk to you more about that process and make sure that in this last phase we incorporate those learnings into the final product. And I do hear you and want to just assure you that as we develop the final version of this plan, that we will certainly be evaluating that opportunity cost, because as you're mentioning, really there's high impact, which is in part dictated by the level of control that the county can exert over any particular issue, and the level of effort that we dedicate to it. So I definitely want to acknowledge that as well. And then there is, to get to the issue of cost, I think one of the things we always like to do is to both sides of the ledger, in the sense that there's cost to the current system, whether that, as Brendan mentioned, is the pollution cost of fossil fuel combustion in terms to our health, the ongoing cost and impact of the climate crisis, both to the county and to individual residents. And then there's the cost of taking action, which is also substantial, and something that we need to bear in mind as we start to hone in on exactly what strategies we're going to prioritize, what strategies the board wants to prioritize. And what we're intending to do in this final phase, as we come back to the work session, is to have a stronger analysis of costs for those strategies, so that the board can look at those, weigh them, interrogate our reasoning behind those cost estimates, and then help us prioritize what that key list of county priorities will be. And as you mentioned, Commissioner, I think if maybe to my mind, the most important part of this plan are the goals and the metrics attached to them. And the strategies are really meant to say, okay, we're beginning this journey. What do we think the path ahead of us looks like? But inevitably, paths fork, obstacles arise, and we'll need to reevaluate strategies periodically in order to make sure that we're heading the course towards climate justice. So, I think, I don't want to discount the importance of strategies, because they are very important, because they dictate, they could be impacting how we spend staff time, or how the county allocates dollars. But I also wanted just to, echo what you were saying in terms of the goals and
Great. I appreciate that. And the reason I didn't use the word cost benefit is that I think you've laid out the benefit in many ways. So this is what's missing is so here's the benefit and here's the cost. And I actually think when you do that there will be community solutions to address some of the costs. I mean, for example, the strategy about every community member has the opportunity to contribute to climate justice in Multnomah County, and one of the actions is fund pathways for climate education. And I think there's a much cheaper way for the county. I don't think the county actually needs to do that, because, for example, Portland Public Schools has already developed a climate curriculum that I'd be surprised if they wouldn't be willing to share it with the SUN programs, with the other school districts in Multnomah County. So I think when you start laying out those costs, that you'll find there'll be ways in which we'll have community partners that are always doing something that we could leverage.
That's a great point.
So that's another just reason I think it's good to lay that out there, and then also assess if we have, to Commissioner Singleton's point about the budget items, is it also allows us to put our constraints dollars behind the sort of the biggest impact strategies. So that's another reason why I'd be interested in that. But thank you again. I'm looking forward to the next iteration. And I hope, and I'm just, a final comment is, I think what makes action plans most powerful is when they're pressure tested by people who maybe may not agree with all the strategies. So I'd really encourage it as we move to implementation and finalizing the plan, that we have that sort of pressure testing, because I think it will make for a stronger, more actionable plan.
Thank you for that. I just wanted to say that's exactly what we intend to do around each of those goals, is to make sure that we're talking to people that don't necessarily agree with us as part of that conversation to do exactly that. And I anticipate it's going to be really valuable. So I really appreciate you bringing that up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jones-Dixon?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for the presentation. As I mentioned back in April, we don't have a PSEP out in District 4 with the 4 cities, so the work that you're doing is extremely valuable. I have just a few recommendations. Just continue to engage with, as I mentioned before, the 3 cities out there, and then I continue to think about the unincorporated portions of the county and the region, like Bridal Veil, Corbett. What role do they play as far as our goals that are laid out here, and being intentional as far as just that level of engagement? And then also on the, I toured CORE, the City of Roses recycling, with a handful of other electeds about a month and a half ago. So again, thinking about like the private sector, the role that they play, especially in districts 3 and 4 out in East County. Outside of that, looking forward to the next phase of this, and we'll follow up with y'all in an email. Actually, I do have one question. We got an email from Northwest Natural. You mentioned the utility roundtable regarding their concerns from the feedback from the climate justice plan. Did you receive that? And do you have a response to just some of the concerns that were raised in the email?
I can speak to it. We included in the packet a letter we received from Northwest Natural and some of their labor partners. And so I'm not sure. We've probably received the email, but I'll just speak to some of the concerns that were raised in their letter. And I think they bring up an important point just around utility planning processes. Really there's a balance right now between the amount of energy we get from electricity and then the amount of energy we get from natural gas. And just to, maybe dramatically oversimplify it, what they're asking us to consider is how that balance of energy translates into utility rates, into the reliability of the system in terms of like keeping the lights on, keeping people warm in the winter, that kind of thing, and doing a little bit more in-depth analysis there. So that's something that we definitely want to do in this final phase and engage with them more.
Got it. Great. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Moyer.
I do appreciate the approach of this, because I do think historically we don't focus on communities that are disproportionately impacted by climate change, and I like that there was a lot of intentionality put into this. I feel like it really does dig in to how people in these communities bear that burden, and tries to focus recommendations on that, and I support that. And I think it does a thorough job laying that out. So I agree with what is laid out as the real price people are today paying and what is likely to continue, and I think it's also important to acknowledge that we don't all bear the price of climate change equally. And sometimes I think our approach is a little too broad strokes and not enough recognizing the disproportionality. So I appreciate that very much about this plan. I think there are some concerns I have about the level of detail in the action items that make me feel unclear about what we would be pursuing exactly. You know, one of the things that I am, and I do think this is just a difference of opinion and nothing wrong with this. I personally want to endorse a climate action plan that I can stand behind the specific recommendations and want to move forward on. And some of the challenge is there are so many recommendations that say create fund program, and that is the entire level of detail. And I am in a difficult position with my colleagues of not only are revenues down this year, but it is very likely that we will be looking at several budget years where there aren't new resources available. And so I don't know, amongst all these recommendations, what is this, like, from your perspective? And I understand there's only so much detail you could really get into, but like, when you say fund the program, to do what? How much? Or maybe a range, and what are the outcomes that we think we can achieve? Because I do think that we'll have to, in any scenario, we would figure out what we could do in what time frame, but also which ones, if we can't do everything, get more bang for the buck. So I would just say, like, that is something that's really hard as a decision maker when it's that level of vagueness. And I am also concerned with our budget reality. Some of these things say create, fund, and advocacy. I'm a little curious, like, okay, if we couldn't create the fund, what level of advocacy could we do within our existing? So there's some options that I'm interested in. There are a few things in here that I had questions about. I'll kind of start with, and again, when I support something, I do believe that is, or if we as an entity support that, I do think that that is a public statement that the policies in here we are recommending. I do not support a few things in here. I don't know the process. I would love us to go through recommendations and vote on them individually, or ask for more detail to come back. Because, you know, here's a one-off that, like, again, good people are going to disagree on this. I don't support moving the voting age to 16 for issues not related to climate change, but to me outweigh the argument. That's me personally. It's totally fine if other people disagree, but I do not want to use county resources to advocate for that personal belief. I have questions about when we are talking about changing programs or different entities. I don't see their feedback on this. Like, the one that Commissioner Brim Edwards brought up around adding climate education into Sun Schools. What conversations have you had with Sun Schools? Does that fit the goals that we have for Sun Schools, and how would that be done? just, you know, and they don't have to give an opinion. I just like, I don't know what that would mean to, because we do have, that program does have set goals. So that's another one. There's a couple of ones that I have just like, with my background, had questions about. Here's one that I have pretty significant issues with. Prohibit the use of ratepayer money for lobbying. I'm going to be very honest, I did spend 20 years of my life as a lobbyist, mainly for nonprofits. I do think that there is a misunderstanding of what lobbyists are and what we do. The idea that we would have energy providers not have representation in rooms where we are discussing complex policy issues, I don't support saying, no, you can't. We actually have to have that. That is how the sausage gets made. Do I believe that public utilities should ever be able to contribute to any campaign? No. I absolutely think that that is a totally inappropriate use of public money. So there's that like difference of, you know, I think people think lobbyists are just paid hack. You know, I would say I don't view my career that way. I think we provide a level of expertise on policy and need to be in rooms even if you hate our employer. So, and that's fine. So that's one that I had real concerns about. There's another one related to the Oregon Building Code and wanting to increase the standards for green buildings. Did you mean like LEED certified buildings, or what did you, I'm trying to understand what you mean there.
The goal, I think, for that strategy was to move towards low carbon building systems, not necessarily any kind of specific certification. And we've seen that kind of strategy looked at in Washington, for example. Mm-hmm. It's still being adjudicated up there, but you know, we've seen other states kind of move in that direction, or other cities and jurisdictions also move in that direction.
What types of buildings would we advocate for this?
Well, the building sector, so just to back up a little bit, so the building sector, not having the numbers in front of me, I think is responsible for about 30% of emissions. And that's a combination of electricity use and the carbon that's, you know, contributed by the generation of that electricity and natural gas use. And so I think there's now statutory obligations in state law to remove the carbon emissions associated with electricity production. And so the remaining balance is really around natural gas consumption within buildings. So there's a variety of strategies. So one would be like new buildings and trying to look at new building construction to, you know, limit the use of gas in new buildings. And then there's policies both in state law now and then being considered at various local jurisdictional levels to try to limit the use of gas in existing buildings. It's more of a challenge because you know, I'm not I don't have experience personally in the building trades, but I know you do, Commissioner. And so, you know, you're probably more familiar than I am with, you know, how challenging that could be with an existing building.
Do you know what the biggest polluter in building is? Overwhelmingly, concrete.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, the embodied carbon, sure. Yeah.
So I'm concerned about this. I would want more detail before endorsing this because I think we got to be very real that this can spike the cost of construction significantly. Mm-hmm. I think some things have more bang for the buck. I am for housing being more resilient and energy efficient, wildly, mm-hmm. but I also think that there is a balance because of the cost of housing being so high. Right now, if you built an apartment building, it would be worth less than the cost of building it. That has absolutely nothing to do with any of this. This has everything to do with tariffs, which are genius. But there is a relationship to cost of construction and building requirements. And so I need more here. I'm not a no on it,
Sure.
but I need more because that balance matters to me in many ways.
I'm just going to do a quick time check. So I don't know how many more, I don't want to cut you off, but I just want to do we have two other items.
Yeah. And then, I think the last one, I think that kind of, I would say my overall, what I would love as like before it comes back for a vote, is I really need the type of action or the strategy to have more.
Yeah.
And some of them, I do think like, these are only the ones that I know about. I have some like general, like, I'm not sure those are the right government organizations, but like the use of 1115 Medicaid waiver around cooling and purifiers, I like that. I'm gonna tell you, having worked with the 1115 waiver, that's a nightmare. But I will tell you that you don't, these are not the right government organizations. It's not up to the state legislature, it's up to the Oregon Health Authority in combination with CMS. And we would be billing coordinated care organizations for this, and therefore it's really a negotiation also with them. And in order to do this, the life has to be a Medicaid covered life, and they have to meet, they have to be members of certain subpopulations, so they have to have an increased health risk. So I'm just like, I've just got a lot of like, maybe, or in theory, but I don't know what you mean by a lot of this stuff. Like, and that gives me unease because I want you to feel like if I voted yes, that like, yeah, go forth.
Yeah.
Do this work. You are representing the board, and I'm not comfortable with the level of detail in order to do that. So that's just kind of my feedback. I think that the problems identified, yes, absolutely in there. Some of the solutions, I don't understand the ramifications of the proposal, and I just want to go into that with eyes wide open. How does this increase cost for people? Who does it impact? How much money would get us what level of result?
Yeah.
Knowing that that's not a total commitment, it's like your best estimate, but I need some more meat
Yeah.
to be able to evaluate, like, yeah, that's, of these options, I might put that up here, or, yeah, but it's maybe not gonna be where we start.
Yeah.
That's my feedback. Okay.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry, we're
Okay.
out of time, but it sounds
you.
like there's a lot of follow-up that can happen
Yeah.
with this. So I just want to appreciate everyone's work on this, and I support the next steps of really engaging around the key areas that have been outlined in the plan, as well as, we've heard loud and clear the request for some more details around what this looks like, and the work that's happening with some of the other efforts. And it's good to hear that some of that coordination is already happening. So thank you, everyone. Appreciate having a chance for the board and for the public to hear about the steps on this, and look forward to having more come forward as this work continues. So thank you so much, John.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioners.
All right, we'll move on to R2.
R2, public hearing and first reading of ordinance amending NCC Chapter 11.500, preschool for all program income tax to reflect certain code changes for the payment of estimated tax.
May I have a motion? Commissioner Singleton moves, Commissioner Brim Edwards seconds, approval of R2. Good morning, Eric.
Good morning, Chair.
Thanks so much for coming forward and bringing this.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. For the record, Eric Ariano, Chief Financial Officer. I'm here to request your approval on a first reading to amend County Code 11.500, which is our preschool for all tax, and more specifically, Section 11.546, which deals with estimated payments for preschool for all. So just wanted to set some context in terms of what the provision currently says in our tax code, and then talk about the actual proposed change. And so under existing tax code, under that section for estimated payments, our preschool for all tax requires that if a taxpayer that is subject to preschool for all has a tax liability of $1,000, what that means that they owe $1,000 or more, they're required to make quarterly estimated payments or to have withholding from their employer throughout the tax year. And we implemented that provision when we implemented the preschool for all tax code for two main reasons. I think the first part was to align with the state of Oregon. This is what they do for their state income tax. I think the second piece was to minimize potential delinquency that could occur from taxpayers not having to pay throughout the year, and then at the end of the year in April, they get a bill, and then they may be delinquent or just be surprised by the size of their bill. So by paying throughout the year, it minimizes, the intent is to minimize delinquency. And I guess a third thing too is that when you require estimated payments throughout the year, is that you have a steady flow of cash coming in throughout the year, rather than it all coming in the April and May period. And so that's our current state in terms of that provision in our tax code. One thing I'll note too is that when we implemented this preschool for all tax, I've said this many times to this board, we aim to conform to supportive housing preschool, or supportive housing's personal income tax, and they actually had this provision as well. In June of this year, the Metro Council approved an amendment to their personal income tax code for supportive housing that increased that threshold of $1,000 for estimated payments to $5,000 beginning in tax year 2026. And so this ordinance before you today for our preschool for all tax code essentially is that amendment to increase our threshold from $1,000 to $5,000, and it mirrors very closely to what Metro Council passed in terms of that increase for estimated payments from $1,000 to $5,000. And just to give you some perspective in terms of how this would impact taxpayers, is I took tax years 2021 to 2023 because they're reflection of the most recent completed tax years, and took a look at how many of those filers were required to make estimated payments, and roughly around 55% of filers had to make estimated payments. And with this proposed change, that percentage of total filers would decrease to roughly just under 18%. So it would significantly reduce the amount of taxpayers that would have to file or to make estimated payments throughout the year. As I noted, about 55% currently have to make estimated payments. That accounts for about a little bit over 90% of actual tax rates that we receive. Again, if the board were to approve this, it'd bring it down estimated payments to filers to about 18%, but it would still account for over 79% of tax receipts. So it doesn't have a significant impact in terms of dollars that the county is receiving throughout the year, but it does have a big impact in terms of the filers that are impacted by having to make estimated payments. I will note that this change is completely revenue neutral. There's no impact to revenues for preschool for all tax. This is really an administrative change. I think the big thing that does change is that a small portion of our collections, instead of coming throughout the year, they will come in the April-May period when those tax filers have to file or make their payments and file. And so I'm recommending this change. I think it's maintaining conformity to supportive housing is always a good thing. We're not required to do it, but it definitely helps taxpayers for consistent processes. And also we share, between Preschool for All and supportive housing, we share a lot of the same taxpayers. So if Metro's making that change, that's going to relieve some taxpayers. If we don't do it, there could be that frustration from taxpayers on the Preschool for All tax side. So, we're doing a second reading next week on the 25th. So aside from that, I'll open up for any questions or comments you may have.
Thank you so much, Eric. Appreciate you walking us through this. We'll go to the board for any questions. We'll start with Commissioner Brem Edwards. Oh, I'm so sorry. Hold on one second. Did we have public testimony on this item?
Yes, we have one person signed up.
Okay, we're going to go to public testimony first, and then we'll go to the board for questions.
We have Ivy Major McDowell.
Chair Vega Peterson and County Commissioners, my name is Ivy Major McDowell, and I use she, her pronouns, and I live in Multnomah County in District 3. I'm here to speak as the Care Advocacy Manager for Family Forward Oregon. We work collectively to educate and advocate for systems that elevate the vital work of care and caregiving in its many forms within our community. And we have been hearing directly from parents, providers, and voters about their frustrations that still have not been addressed from the county for the Preschool for All program. Lack of process and accountability. Voters approved the measure with the statute Chapter 11D that states a technical team will be convened by the chair's office and will report to the board before January 1st, 2026. With a recommendation regarding the increase to subsection A and the future revenue requirements to ensure the program is fully funded. Additionally, we share the same concerns raised by Commissioner Megan Moyer on the conflict of interest with business consultant John DePugna, who serves on the Preschool for All Technical Advisory Group and Governor Tina Kotek's task force, which called to end Preschool for All. We recommend that the Technical Advisory Group be reset and convened and approved by the full commission. Our voters deserve transparency in process, selection, and members, and accountability to the statute passed. There are too many committees with no clarity on how they overlap and which committee has the decision-making power. Voters approved the measure with Statute 11516A for Preschool for All Program Advisory Committee to review Preschool for All program expenditures, provide program oversight, review data, advise evaluation efforts, and make policy recommendations to the county. This committee should continue to convene and be the primary group to make recommendations to the county. Thus, the current role of the Program Advisory Group, which is responsible for reviewing the scenarios that come out of the TAG and then make recommendations about the potential changes to the program, is duplicative and siloed. Lack of transparency on consultants, selection, and budget allocation for the Preschool for All program. The county paid $238,000 to Laura Media to do outreach and get feedback on the program to understand communities' expectation for the program. The survey did not work with existing committees like the Program Advisory Committee or the Board of Commission. We've reviewed the survey questions and found that the questions asked were biased and aligned with the intent of the current TAG committee to ultimately end the program. Our recommendation is that the chair share consulting recommendations and the full budget details of the Preschool for All program to the Board of Commissioners and the Program Advisory Committee, and seek approval for new spending exceedings $100,000 to be good stewards of our taxpayer dollars.
Thank you. All right, thank you. Now we'll go to the board for questions on this, and we'll start with Commissioner Brem Edwards.
Thank you, and I just want to share some appreciation for that last public comment, as I think the TAG should have been convened a year and a half ago to provide recommendations. We sort of, the previous commission made a decision not to increase the tax that was in the, that was actually in the initiative without the TAG ever, Technical Advisory Committee ever meeting and providing any sort of recommendations. And then the commission kind of careened into the indexing discussion with, I think, what was just a hurry up sort of set of meetings around it. So I think we do very much agree that we need a much more robust process overall, so that we understand the impacts that are involved. Having said that, I want to thank you, Eric, for the presentation. And I was just going to preparing a question about what the impact would be in terms of the numbers of filers that would change and the impact. And so even, it looks like there would be potentially a like 11% decrease in the tax receipts through this change. So just confirming with you that that's not large, doesn't appear to be a large number. Well, I guess, how much is that 11%?
In terms of dollars?
Yeah.
I don't have that in front of me right now.
Okay,
But,
if you just,
yeah, I can bring that for the second reading. Yeah, absolutely.
That's fine, but I'd like to know how much it is. And I'm assuming, since you're recommending this, that whatever that 11% is, that you also, this would fit into, you're not concerned about the impact on a steady cash flow?
Yeah, not concerned about that.
This is a tax administration questions. I know we got into this related to indexing. So the quarterly payments that occur, is that something that is, if you're an individual taxpayer without an accountant, is that something that's calculated through TurboTax?
No. Well, when you do, just because I tested it last year, when you actually, because it just came out last year for last tax year, when you go through that process with TurboTax, it actually does estimate for the next cycle what your potential payments would be. It's just an estimate with TurboTax. So, but if you didn't have that, or you didn't have an accountant, you would have to go through the process to determine what your estimated payment would be by yourself. There's resources that are out there, both on the Revenue Bureau's website, as well as our website, in terms of trying to estimate what your tax liability would be, and then what your estimated payments would come out to. And this also applies to when you're having your employer do withholding as well.
So, and when I used the term TurboTax, I wasn't providing any sort of preference to tax services. It was just a generic
Commissioner.
description for tax services if you didn't have an accountant do it. So just so I understand, while it doesn't like spit out your quarterly, here are your like your coupons to file your quarterly payments, it does provide guidance on whether you might need to make quarterly payments?
Absolutely, yeah.
So my then question is, there was a lot of conversation during indexing about getting information to people, or getting information baked into TurboTax. Do you anticipate this being baked in for the 2026 tax year in time?
Yeah.
The stakes are a little bit lower because it's actually I mean, people who aren't required to pay it, but they're still going to pay it at a certain.
Yeah, we are, first of all, we're proposing recommending it for tax year 2026, so we have time. But if the board were to approve this request, we have it lined up for some of the annual communications that we do with taxware softwares and CPAs and payroll companies around this change. So we have significant time, or enough time, to actually incorporate some of these changes.
Great. And I'm assuming that just in terms of alignment, that Metro also has the January 1, 2026 tax year as the start date?
Correct.
Okay. And so I'm supportive of this. Thank you for bringing it forward. This was in the indexing resolution
It
I
was,
had
yep.
previously, so thank you for taking it out and moving it, advancing it. I think that just the last thing I would say is while we're sort of selectively choosing one thing to align with Metro and have not aligned on some other measures. So again, this getting the technical advisory group's recommendations sooner rather than later would be super.
Yeah, because Metro did.
Very helpful to the full commission.
Yeah, Metro did index in addition to this piece in their tax code in June.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jones-Dixon.
No additional questions.
All right, Commissioner
Thank you,
Moore?
Eric.
Commissioner Singleton? Okay, I do not have any questions either. I appreciate you working quickly to get this, this administrative piece happening. And then just to be clear, so I just want to be clear, the main impact really is that it's about when people are paying their taxes, not the fact that they are paying.
Correct. They'll still have they'll be subject to taxes. Just they'll be able to pay on tax day.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, Marina, Tasha, can we have a roll call vote?
Commissioner Moyer?
Aye.
Commissioner Singleton?
Yes.
Commissioner Brim Edwards? Yes. Commissioner Jones-Dixon? Chair Vega Peterson?
Aye, the first reading is approved and the second reading is scheduled for September 25th, 2025. We're going to move into a work session, so we'll take a very quick 5-minute recess while we move over to the format for the work sessions, and we will reconvene then. Session. So we are now having a work session where we're going to talk about House Bill 4002, the deflection program here in Multnomah County. I appreciate Commissioner Singleton and Brim Edwards for bringing this forward today. There continues to be a lot of interest in deflection and how it's going throughout the state and here in Multnomah County. We just recently passed the one-year mark for the program, so it seems like a really good time to have this conversation. So with that, I will turn things over to Commissioner Singleton.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say a couple of things, and then I'll turn it over to my colleague, Commissioner Brim Edwards. And I want to appreciate your partnership in bringing this forward and the work that's gone on behind the scenes to get the materials and information together for today. So I wanted to share a little bit of background of why we're here today. And it really started with some conversations with colleagues. It became apparent that multiple commissioners have input into this program to make it more effective at supporting the people being served in getting into treatment and entering recovery. I want to be clear that that is not something that is solely the work or responsibility of the Deflection and Sobering Center staff, and it warrants a broader lens and coordination across the county. Since taking office in December, I've been asking questions about opening referrals to Portland Street Response, homeless service providers, et cetera, as well as attending to problems that I see in the data and how we present it. I also wrote and passed a budget note to craft a plan to connect this center to the addictions recovery system, including clean and sober shelters, transitional recovery housing, and intensive outpatient treatment, because this should be a part of the larger continuum of care. Since then, we have reached the year anniversary of the center's opening, and it is imperative that we review what is working well, where we need to improve, and how we position the center to fulfill the desires of our community members and partners. The goal is, as a commission, to share what we are hearing from our constituents, to look at opportunities for change, and take advantage of the energy of this new board that we bring to this subject. All of that said, I want to remind us about our discussion during our inaugural board retreat and ask each of us to focus on attacking the problem and not the people. We can all agree there are improvements that need to happen and feel passionate about those improvements, and when we feel that way, we can often be more emotive, firm, and frustrated. As a former department director, I can tell you that regardless of the speaker's intent, those factors have translated to a dialogue and language that was personal, accusatory, and harmful to staff in the past. We have an opportunity today to partner with departments and develop trust with each other so that we can move more efficiently and effectively to provide clear direction for staff and make needed improvements to this program. And Commissioner Brim Edwards, I'd like to hand it to you to share a little bit before we jump in.
Great, thank you, Commissioner Singleton, and to the Commission for allowing this conversation to happen today. I really appreciate you bringing this forward, because I know we have slightly different takes on what we want to explore, but I think, and I know that other commissioners also have sort of different perspectives and also different expertise about ways in which we can really optimize this system. And I appreciate the budget note because, to your point, Commissioner Singleton, while that continuum of care is not the obligation of and the responsibility of the Pathway Center, it is absolutely essential if this program is going to be successful that individuals are deflected into something. So thank you for that. I also want to thank Natalie with the Pathway Center for the pre-briefing conversation to go a little bit deeper on some topics. So I really appreciate that. So today's work session, from my perspective, some of the things I want to get out of it is to really reviewing the effectiveness of the county's deflection program, outcomes to date, utilization of county funds, supporting this effort with the goal of improving connections from the deflection away from jail, the criminal justice system, to treatment and recovery services, so that we're improving the lives of the people being served and also improving outcomes for community livability. We know that deflecting individuals from drug possession from jail and getting them on a pathway to recovery is a more effective strategy to ending their addiction, getting them on the path to recovery, and also promoting community safety. As the chair noted, we're at the one-year anniversary of Multnomah County's deflection program, and the services are offered, and I think this is an excellent time for the commission to look at the data, what we're seeing in other counties, we're seeing across the state, And again, with the goal of, how do we optimize our resources? We've really invested a lot of money in the Pathway Center and potentially, and then into the long-term sobering center that will also offer deflection services. Since opening last year, the Deflection Center has seen 606 individuals, according to the most recent monthly report. And these quarterly reports provide information, but they're not really comprehensive enough to tell us the story of what's happening, which I think one of the goals of today is to dig into that a little bit deeper. In addition, what we do see from the data is that the number of individuals accessing service referrals is quite low in contrast to the number of individuals coming into the center. I'm concerned the program isn't producing the outcomes yet, because I think that's our goal, the outcomes that our community needs, the individuals who are being served, what they need, and that also how are we using our limited county dollars in a way that we're most effectively supporting those individuals who are being deflected into deflection services. And so my focus, I hope today in our work session we'll be able to look at the program eligibility criteria, the county system of care for those addictions, again to Commissioner Singleton, and I know Commissioner Moyer has been very interested in how we build that out, and also how we connect it to like sustainable funding. I'm also interested in looking at the program's goals and objectives, data trends and outcomes, and what the roles and responsibilities are for the county and our system partners. I'll be interested in how this connection between what's happening at the Deflection Center and when people leave with that care plan, how we are continuing to provide sustained support for individuals to get on their road to recovery, because I do believe the vast majority of voters and legislators felt that that was the goal, not just to deflect people away from jail, but to deflect them into a path to treatment, recovery, and services. So I think today's conversation is not going to be exhaustive. I hope that there'll be an opportunity for each of the commissioners to sort of get questions on the table, have a discussion about what is most of interest to the commissioners in terms of like what we've seen over the last year and the go forward, how we want to focus this commission's attention on deflection and the outcomes it's getting. So I'm looking forward to the conversation today, and again, thank Commissioner Singleton for bringing it forward, and I'm also looking forward to, I know Commissioner Moyer has expressed some interest in putting some things on the table for consideration, and looking forward to that as well.
Great, thank you. And then I just want to check, are we going to be inviting Justin up? Yes. Okay, and then just on your remarks, Commissioner Berman Edwards, we're looking at having that fuller conversation with the health department folks, and we're looking at when we can make sure that we have the full year's data that has been verified to bring forward to the board, so we're looking at November for that.
And Chair, I would add, I think, just to jump into the work session portion, it isn't just the health department. I think we have to do coordination with the Homeless Services Department as well as HRS to look at some of the addictions continuum conversations that are happening outside of just what Multnomah County is doing, but thinking about some of those regional resources and lack of resources for recovery programs.
That's great, yeah. All right.
Hi, everybody. For the record, Justin Black. I use he, him pronouns. I am the Deputy COO over the Health Department, DCJ, and DCS. And Tasia, I'll just have you go to slide 3, because given the fact that all your offices got a one-on-one with the Health Department to talk deflection, I'm going to be pretty broad in my statements, and also given that in early November, the Health Department should be able to come back with that full years of data with a deep analysis of trends they're seeing and connections to services and all this stuff you've been talking about. So I'll just start, what is deflection? House Bill 4002 created deflection, and I'm going to quote the statute because I think it's really important to get the context of how deflection was created. Deflection is a collaborative program between law enforcement agencies and behavioral health entities to assist individuals who may have substance use disorder, other behavioral health disorder, or co-occurring disorders to create community-based pathways to treatment, recovery support services, housing, case management, or other services. So really it's that connection between law enforcement and behavioral health. The bill that created deflection did a lot of things. I'm not going to talk about 90% of the things it did, but the three kind of overarching for this conversation is that it recriminalized the possession of small amounts of illicit substances. It encouraged law enforcement to refer a person to a deflection program when a person is suspected of committing or has been cited, arrested for unlawful possession of controlled substance, constituting a drug enforcement misdemeanor. So that's that connection with law enforcement. And then thirdly, it created a granting process for counties. And this is important for the funding conversation. So it created a granting process for counties. Initially, Multnomah County received about $4.3 million for the operation of deflection for that connection. It requires that the district attorney, law enforcement agencies, CMHP, providers from a burn, and partners be included in the development of the grant application to receive funding for deflection services. And that's really the basis for the House Bill 4002 leadership table that we see here at the county. I will say there was a change in the most recent legislature around funding for deflection. Initially, it was based on the Measure 110 formula of distribution of funds. That was backed out. Now 25% of the funds for deflection are based on that old criteria, but then 75% of the funds are now calculated based on the projected number of individuals eligible for deflection, and based on your local criteria and projected numbers of individuals who will be enrolled. Tasia, you can go to the next slide. I'm going to spend a moment on the leadership table because I think that really is the crux of the development around eligibility, requirements around deflection, and timing of deflection. So currently, the 4002 leadership table includes Portland and Gresham Chiefs of Police, Multnomah County Chair, Multnomah County Sheriff, Multnomah County District Attorney, Public Defenders, Presiding Judge of the Multnomah County Circuit Court, Chief Judge for the Circuit Court, and representatives from the City of Portland, Chair's Office, DCJ, Health Department, and LIPSIC. The 4002 leadership table really has been the crux of setting the criteria, as I said. So deflection eligibility, so an individual can be arrested for possession of a controlled substance, may be eligible for deflection in lieu of an arrest. Participation in deflection is voluntary, and the individual must not be committing any other crime, have any warrants, or failed to complete deflection in the last 30 days. An individual who is on supervision is still eligible for deflection, and there's a conversation with DCJ about whether they're deflected or not. Currently, Multnomah County is one of 4 counties that have this criteria. Other counties are allowing other offenses to be included in deflection, or maybe not in deflection, but allowing people who have committed other or are suspected of committing crimes to be included in the deflection pool. And I know that's a conversation that the House Bill 4002 table is having now.
Can I ask for some follow-up information?
Yeah.
One is, of the 4002 committee, how are decisions made? Is it has to be unanimous, it's broken up by jurisdiction, and that jurisdiction decides each part? I'm trying to understand how we got to this policy. And so I'm just curious about what the advisory bodies or decision-making bodies are and how do they function and who sits on them. If I could have that in writing, that would be awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, we can provide that in writing. And I think a lot of that lies with who is fundamentally responsible for those interactions. So if you talk about that interaction with law enforcement on the street, in Portland, PPB is really responsible for setting and enforcing what this table comes to.
So just when you come back With that, this is a topic that I would like to have the commission to have a discussion about. While the individuals who are participating in that discussion are specified in statute, all of those discussions did not occurred in private. So I mean, from my perspective, what as a policymaker and as somebody who was advocating for a significant number of resources that will be supporting defection long-term through the 24/7 sobering and trauma management center, is that I like to hear sort of what, like where there is disagreement and just and understand what the root of that is, but all of the information that came to us was not through the leadership, the members of the leadership table coming and presenting either their recommendations or as a, like, here's where there were disagreements, or here's where we, thought we should look more deeply at it. So, I think in year two, for me, that's really important to understand that, especially when we look at the outcomes. And, I want to know what kind of concerns people had about the definition of success.
And I would add, I think that there's a policy, I've had 0 conversations about the content of leadership team discussions. And so I think there's a piece for me that is also, how do we have a policy conversation as a board that the chair can carry into those?
Yeah, and I'm happy, and that's one of the reasons I was looking forward to this work session today, because I think we actually have a leadership team meeting this afternoon where we are going to be looking at, and I will say that the leadership table was very clear. Like, we were setting up the criteria for success and for eligibility based on not knowing what this whole program is going to look like, because it was a brand new thing for our state. And recognizing that as we learned about this system, we were going to be pivoting, we were going to be improving the program, and we were going to be taking another look at those conversations on what is the criteria for eligibility and what is the criteria for successful deflection. And that's exactly the conversations that we're starting to have right now. So looking at eligibility, looking at success, with the goal of having those updates done by the end of the calendar year, so we could go into 2026 with with an understanding of what these changes would look like. So I think the conversations that we would be having both today and then looking into like the November briefing that we would have on that are going to be really helpful and timely for that.
And I would propose that, based on what we learn about decision-making, structure, and power, there may be 2 different definitions of success. There may be this is what this team defines as successful deflection from law enforcement engagement. And then I think we clearly think that success means how the human being has moved forward in their recovery and their treatment. And so I think that we have to maybe figure out that there might be 2 different spaces for that and make sure that we leave room for, if we're not the deciders on what success is defined at the 4002 table, that we don't, it's not quite adequate for what I'm hearing from myself and my colleagues that we want to see.
Yeah, I guess one of the things I would say from a budgetary standpoint, we do have some decision-making power, because from my perspective, I want those sort of very precious dollars to be optimized, and I'd like them to be optimized on a definition of success, which is moving that individual along. So I think it's a very good point about what's legally, how that gets decided, what the legal definition is be. But I also think we're going to be accountable for setting what we think from the county's perspective that definition of success should be, because from just conversations in the broader community and with leaders and people even at the leadership table, the definition of success when it's just they access a service which may or may not even have had anything to do with their addiction or getting treatment or their road to recovery, that, you know, we're some like patting, and I'm not talking about any of the staff, but the patting this ourselves in the back, like, hey, we look at all these people that we had that were successful, you know, when actually maybe we're not providing that connection to a continuum of services. I think those are important discussions for us to have in public. So I'm concerned that it sounds like the leadership table is moving ahead with a set of discussions, and yes, we can inform, you know, maybe our discussions informing them, but I'm wondering if it's not a public meeting, how it actually isn't, you know, they're getting what we're, the input we have, and how we're also understanding what the different perspectives at the table might be, because as I understood it, there were a lot of different perspectives at that table, and it seemed to come back with like, everybody agreed on X, which is not what I heard across the board from people who necessarily participated in that discussion. But we have no way of knowing because the meetings were in private, and I just think we got to do our work in public. It's public dollars, and people's lives are at stake, and so I fundamentally believe that we can't be having private meetings.
I'm so sorry if I derailed your presentation. As we talk about information to inform our conversation in November, and I want to have as full as we can look at outcomes for individuals. Can we, one of the questions I have had is, have people who have gone through deflection, successfully or unsuccessfully, how many of them have later picked up a more serious charge? Which I would then say, okay, we probably weren't successful if that intervention led to a more serious, I mean, it didn't lead to it, but that situation did not change its trajectory and led to a more serious charge. That is not deflection eligible.
Yeah. I mean, I think we can see if that data is available for all those individuals. I would also suggest maybe it would be helpful if not only that that written explanation of how decisions were made, but also that span of control to really flesh that out over, you know, kind of which, this is a cross-jurisdiction, cross-department program, and understanding kind of roles and responsibilities, I think, is very important in this conversation, especially when you're talking about, you know, what is success for law enforcement, what is success for treatment, and how those things fit together. So I'll suggest that we bring that back as well.
I agree, and that's part of where I was going with there may be two different definitions. There's this table, because law enforcement, the DA, they're not responsible for what we might think is success as the county that I think we are responsible for our services. And so we may just need to get comfortable with more than one definition based on the lens that we're talking from. So,
and I will say in all my meetings with y'all, when we talk about deflection, that comes up very clearly. And so, you know, I will just very briefly kind of say what the current definition of, you know, successfully doing deflection looks like, which is when an individual opts into deflection, they're brought in by law enforcement of their own free will, so that this is a voluntary program, to the Coordinated Pathways Center. The person completes deflection if they undergo a medical and SUD screening, meet with a case manager to receive a care plan with referrals to services, sign a release of information, and they access at least one of those service referrals on their care plan within 30 days of the date of deflection. Referrals to care in the care plan can include outpatient SUD treatment services, withdrawal management, housing, medical services, or other SUD supportive services. And I know there's been a lot of question, this came up at City Council about like what a successful interaction with one of the services means. And that means that they go to the service, you know, that they enroll, that they start beginning to receive service. What it doesn't mean right now, which I think you all are talking about, is that they successfully complete. So if they go into treatment as part of their deflection, it's that they've gone in and they've participated in it. It doesn't mean that they're clean and sober afterwards. That is not a definition of success right now. It's just that they kind of made that first attempt in. In housing, it may mean that they go into housing. it doesn't necessarily mean that they're still in housing. And that there's not a time constraint on there.
I think that's part of where I don't, it's not even that the person is, we don't have enough spaces, right? So I don't want to say that we expect everybody. We also know that recovery is a process, right? And relapse is real, and we don't expect people to be clean and sober forevermore. However, I do think it's about the person actually having a bed and taking them, whether it's a clean and sober shelter, which is not treatment, but it is a place where they have more opportunity for success because they are now clean and now they're in a more supportive environment, as opposed to now where somebody could leave deflection, go back onto the streets, successfully show up at outpatient treatment, but trying to be clean and sober on the streets is a very significantly challenging effort. And so that's where it is, how are we actually setting the person up for success? I want us to get away from this like service idea and that the connection to service and really focus on the human person. Some people may not need outpatient treatment. Some people may be successful in housing, but right now the link is they've made a phone call to a housing provider, not necessarily that they got housing. And that's where I think there's some low-hanging fruit for us to make some more explicit connections, because again, it's not the responsibility of this staff to do that, and I know they can't walk everybody to every service, but we have to figure out how to better link people. I think staff should be checking HMIS, and if they have a case manager, I would have loved to get a call to say, hey, your client's here. Can you help transport them? We have them a bed at such and such. I would absolutely love that type of call. I think we should be getting by name list information. I'm not clear if we know that folks who are coming in and are homeless are actually in our by name list so that they can get connected to longer term services. So these are some of the things that, to me, it's not about the health department creating a bunch of housing and homelessness expertise, but it's making those more explicit connections and de-siloing a bit of how these two systems are currently set up.
I just want to respond to.
Kind of is. I mean, I will say it kind of is, so.
Yeah, and I do actually want to respond to something, because you implied that we're looking at success as somebody's all the way through treatment. I don't think there's anybody on this commission who thinks somebody's going to get through treatment in 30 days. So it says, are they on, for me, it's like, are they on the journey? And then how are we, I don't think the county's obligation is like, hey, 30 days are over, like, we're done. It's like, how are we creating those connections? And so I guess I'm really concerned if we aren't checking HMIS, because to me, that is like, would be a super valuable tool that we already have that we should be utilizing. I think the other concern is that success could be defined as something other than something along the treatment spectrum. Is, yes, we want people to get housing if they need some sort of health, other health care. But if the county reports like this person successfully completed deflection, I think the broader community believes that means that they are actually engaged in something. They didn't just call a housing provider or set up a dental appointment or something, but they actually are engaged in accessing either peer support or one of the number of other things that actually relate to their addiction. And I'm not dismissing those other things. It's just, I wanted, when you said what we think the definition of success is, I think it's getting them engaged in that continuum and supporting them along that, not just in their 30 days.
So I think this is a really great conversation, and one of the things that I want to just note is there's definitely a difference in what is deflection, also what is paid for by the state for the deflection pieces, and this desire that I'm hearing and that all of us want of like, how do you then continue to engage that person along the continuum of recovery, treatment, stability, and health, right? And so I mean, it's really appropriate for have this, because that's really going to be on the county then of like, what are those steps beyond deflection, and how do we make investments in that for both the individual, but as the system itself to continue people along that path. And that is going to be, I think, different than what the definition of deflection success is that the CJC is granting out the dollars for.
I would like to acknowledge that what we can offer and how we define success, I think, has a direct relationship with decisions our partners will make on utilization of deflection, where, you know, I had some conversations with PPB leadership about deflection and my desire that that be a more utilized resource, and I got some candid answers that I think indicated a view that it does not change the trajectory of an individual's behavior, and it may not be worth their time as officers. Again, I'm not saying that represents everyone's feelings. That's the feedback I got. I live, in my mind, I would love to be at a place where we could have a conversation about potentially a little bit broader number of charges being available, but I think that conversation's a difficult one to have if we can't show that it's leading to people changing their lives. And so I do think that we can't totally divorce those policy conversations and our conversations, because I don't think certain things are on the table that I think we would like to see that are not in our purview if we aren't actively having a conversation of going beyond CJC requirements. And I was in the legislature, not as a member, I've never been a legislator, or as an advocate during 4002, and participated in some sub-tables. I, thank God, was not in the room for some of the spiciest conversations, but did track it closely and was very aware of what different lawmakers thought they were doing, what some of the motivation for why things are defined the way they are. And I gotta be honest, at the end of the day, I was not supportive of 4002 because I thought it was a cynical bill that if they were serious about creating options to recovery, they had an obligation to fund it, which they were nowhere near the ballpark of what was necessary to stand up a treatment system that could commit the way Commissioner Britton-Edwards is talking about. I am passionate, and this is like the conversations I've been having of, we can't wait for the state because they're not going to do it. I don't think there's legislative commitment to it, and I don't think there's the talent and infrastructure at the health authority to do it. I'm just going to be totally honest. I also think we've got a financial issue that is very real with our healthcare system. But I do think that it is a moral obligation to be able to offer a real path to recovery, which I would hope, if we can do that, allows for some of these conversations about, okay, if there's a real path and we can commit to that, if we're committing to somebody who says yes, even if it's not a completely smooth journey, maybe that opens up a conversation about a little bit more expansive utilization. Again, it might require more of those individuals if the charges are more, or whatever. That's not my decision. But I think even to be able to have those conversations in good faith, there's work totally outside of what's happening in that deflection center that is necessary in order to make a genuine commitment to somebody with and be able to follow through. I would also say, I think this is a good time to look at our model versus other jurisdictions' models who work under the same 4002. I have had a conversation with 4D that is contracting with the city of Gresham, and they have a mobile approach. I'm not saying we should or shouldn't do that, but I asked, like, how is it going? What are you seeing? And 4D said to me, we probably get 2 to 3 people a week into treatment. I was like, how do you do that? Like, one, how do you know they went? And 2, how do you do that? First, they say they know they went because they physically took them. So they walked in the door with them. That is resource intensive. The second was, when does it not work? And their reply was, when I cannot get them a spot and I say, come back.
Yeah.
I never see them again. And I think that's real, and I think we need, that's one example, but I think we need to have some of these conversations about what is working and not working in other jurisdictions for to influence how we potentially make adjustments.
So I would ask that we bring in some of the data, even qualitative data from the mobile work that we were doing at the start, because I heard a lot of good feedback from the providers about that model and what they found effective. I know we don't have the money to do everything, but I think we did do mobile where they were taking people. Similar feedback that I heard from what you heard from 4D. But since we've done that, it would be great to actually have that be a part of that next briefing and conversation that we have.
And I said that 4D program is the county's program. So yeah, and that I think that is actually one of the great conversations to have. I'll just kind of interject my view here is, that expansion. And we look at, other counties, they have different timelines. So they allow someone to move through the system a little longer, and they track them longer to help find those outcomes. There's different ways to deliver connection to services. I will also say that, our center is open 24 hours, and that is actually one of the hurdles is, somebody shows up at 2 in the morning and needs a specific service that is not open at that time. And so there's not that way to transport them directly. When possible, staff does transport to, on their care plan, that they try their best to get them to the person or to the service directly so that there isn't that disconnect. I think Judge Greenlight did a great job at City Council the other day talking about, the failure of Community Court and others that, they had a huge no-show rate. And so really making that real physical handoff is really important, and expanding our ability to do that would be helpful.
And that brings me back again to where I think we could be leveraging. I really feel confident that a large number of folks who are coming through those doors have caseworkers as part of their homeless services connection, and those staff are often much more flexible in their ability to put somebody in the car and just take them somewhere than we tend to have for county staff. So I know I keep saying it, but I also really want to see it happen, because just remembering being that provider who is, doing everything in our power to get that person housed and then not knowing that they're connected to a service is really frustrating.
So just 2 points. I'm just going to build off Commissioner Moyer's comment about utilization. So if I look at, if we've had about approximately 600 individuals, that's about 2 people a day. And I know, because I voted on the FAC ones, and the knowing what sort of resources are going into that is, I just think we have such a huge opportunity to better utilize those resources more effectively, because I don't want to say that like the 2 people potentially a day or less than 2 people didn't get started on a journey, but I just think of like, we have resources there, and how do we serve more people and then get this longer continuum? One thing I'm interested in is like, should it be longer than 30 days? So we're looking at how we're providing those supports. A piece of data that I really would like for the next discussion is in the quarterly reports, there are there's a lot of data on what sort of referrals were made. And the piece that I would like to know is, like, if a referral was made, say, to residential treatment or to mental health treatment, was it actually available? Because I think that will tell us also like where the gaps are. Because if we made a referral to detox or withdrawal management, but actually there wasn't space? Did the county create a situation in which, like that golden moment, because when somebody is taken to deflection, I think it is a moment of opportunity for the individual and also for the county, law enforcement, and everyone else to engage in a way to sort of, it's a disruption. Frankly, that's what it was designed to be. But like at that moment of disruption and opportunity, do we actually have that? So I'd like to see the data on that, because that would tell me something. Is it that somebody's just not accessing it, or actually it wasn't there to access? And again, I'd be interested on just recommendations on whether we extend the time period in terms of not like sort of you're done because you access this within 30 days, because that seems like more of a check the box activity versus are we actually putting the individual, as Commissioner Singleton says, at the center of the care and the work.
So I just want to do a quick time check. It's about 12:20. I think we can, and I know people start getting angry. I know I do if I don't have lunch. So is 12:30 a good time, and then we can continue the conversation that?
I do want to expand on something the Commissioner said. So, currently all the referrals are from law enforcement. So this PPB, Gresham, OSP has referred some, Sheriff's Office. The program has been looking about how to expand that aperture to include PSR, coordinating with homelessness services. You literally took me into my next part of my notes here. But to open that door a little broader, and then that conversation around eligibility for folks so that there can be more utilization of the center.
I think one of the things that is interesting to me, I mean, I know we're talking about deflection today, but the fact is, like, we have sobering that is going on at that same place, and we have the same opportunities with that population that is going through sobering to figure out what that looks like for them to continue on in the continuum. That is, and honestly, like at this point, sobering is solely in the counties because we are still waiting for our partners at the city to participate in helping to fund that work. But we will be able to, but that is also an opportunity to look at, so as we're talking about deflection today, but I think it's very important that if we're looking at how are we getting people who have taken the step, who have taken the first step into, getting stable and healthier, like how do we help work with that population as well to continue them in the continuum of work?
Absolutely, and I would say every time I say deflection, I try to say end sobering, because I don't think that I don't think they need different systems. It should look really clean for the staff on site to be able to know, regardless of which door this person enters, this is our protocol for connecting them to the larger system.
And when we have that permanent center, not only will deflection services and sobering be connected, but there also will be withdrawal management just on the other side of the house. So hopefully that is another open door. Commissioner Jones-Dickson, do you have any questions or anything you want to put on the table for the commission to consider or look for, or information that you would like?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to the staff for taking, Mark and everyone else for taking the time on Monday for just a pre-briefing. A couple things that when I left the conversation, I started to think, I think we should consider the patient population, the population that we're serving, and have a deeper understanding. This is an extremely complex issue, and this is coming from someone that's actively serving a family member right now, and with everything that they're going through. So just if that can be in the presentation. And then I've continued to harp on just the need for having a piece of technology that's unbiased, that can actually, so we can actually track and see one's progress. Because, for instance, my brother, he's in and out of, sometimes he wants to receive services, and then other times he doesn't want to receive services, and there's, just so it's easier to, just so we can manage it. And this is heavy, it's a lot. And then the final question I have is just on the interagency, the leadership team, the folks that are setting the policy, do we have representation like from 4D recovery service providers, and then folks that have lived experience as far as interacting with our current system here in the county and within the region? And if not, we probably should.
Yeah. MHAO, and I'm trying to remember the other provider that's on there.
Okay.
Miracles.
Yeah.
Miracles is.
Okay. So yeah, I'm processing a lot right now, and we'll be actively working with the team as far as recommendations moving forward. And thank you, DA, for being here too.
Yeah, thank you, DA, for being here. There's also tons of staff, and I know like everybody's taking notes on the conversation, so incorporating everybody's desires of what we are going to be bringing back, but also, priorities of folks as we're talking about eligibility and successful and requirements for success.
So I want to, I think there's a couple of things I just want to make sure to say out loud, and I also want to know how we can work together to make sure that what we're asking today shows up in not just the briefing, but in our future conversations. Because I don't want to, I feel like I keep repeating myself on this issue in particular, and I don't want to keep doing that. It's not fun for me, it's not fun for the staff. But I'll start with just some of the other lists that I see as next steps. Convening clean and sober shelter providers to discuss referral pathways with HSD. I think we should focus on county-funded shelters first, knowing that there's others, but let's start there where we actually have some say. Training behavior with the staff in conducting by name list to get the information for that, as well as the ability to get into HMIS. I think we need to just quickly update the ROI to include the ability to do that. We already have an open data system, so it shouldn't matter which provider they're working with. I think there's a conversation to be had with Homeless Services Department about the chat team and any connecting to folks on site that needs to be done to do the coordinated access assessment, so that if people need PSH, they get on that list sooner than later. I think you've heard a lot about the briefing, but then I think there's also a component that's developing a legislative agenda, so I appreciate that Stacey's here with us today too, because we know that we don't have enough, as Commissioner Moyer pointed out, funded programs to do recovery. We don't have nearly enough intensive outpatient, let alone transitional recovery housing, and the counties cannot just pay for all of this. I know there's been a lot of advocacy around that. But I would say that there's a regional approach to this where it's not just Multnomah County arguing for this, but it is a regional conversation of what we need here. I would add that I think this links a lot to some of the discussions about SHS and how we have a regional approach to that. So Clackamas County, for example, wanting to build a recovery center, what does that mean for the region, and how do we either have access or referral pathways to that. I say that to say there's, I think, a lot of work to be done before the November briefing, and I really, I want to be involved in helping to move those pieces forward, so I would look to how we can do that, make sure that it happens, and find this balance between sense of urgency and thoughtful decisions, right? We have to move. I'm frustrated, and I've only been here since December. The community's frustrated, so we have to figure out how to balance. We know that it takes work, and we want to be thoughtful and make good decisions, but we also have to move, and we can't just do briefings and work sessions over and over again.
Go ahead.
Okay.
I have some closing.
Okay. I am very interested, I think, as Commissioner Singleton also stated, looking at this from a person, outcome for individuals. So I'm also interested in exploring policy options and programmatic options that lead to significant change for individuals, which I do understand is not necessarily the requirements of 4002. That is just a priority as a commissioner, that I don't want to lose an opportunity to save somebody's life. I want to define success as we are doing the absolute best practice to engage somebody to move to an outcome that significantly changes the trajectory of their life. That, to me, is my goal from deflection, even though I'm well aware what the statute says. But I'm like, if we're gonna have this moment and this opportunity with somebody, you don't get that many come to Jesus moments. And if you can't make the most of that for somebody, you squandered an opportunity that could have saved their lives. And so when we have this conversation, we're gonna obviously have to have it in the context of 4002, but I would also like to have a conversation, and this might be a request to the health department. What are best practices in how to make, let's be honest, mandatory interaction most likely to lead to positive engagement in recovery? If we could also have that context so that we understand which types of policies have had the most significant results when, and often it's going to be, and what services need to be available to make that happen. And I want to have that conversation. I want to know, like, you need to be able to guarantee X, Y, Z, and hand that off. And that path is like set out, and I just want to know what works. Thank you.
So just in closing, I really appreciate everybody's engagement today, and I have some additional, I think, I'm completely in agreement that the legal definition of success is one thing, and I think it should be reviewed now that we're our 1-year anniversary. But really, I think our community is counting on us to have this a higher standard of what success is, and strive for that. Knowing that it's a much higher bar. We're not just deflecting people out of jail, we're deflecting them into something versus just into the abyss, which we don't want to do. Some information I would like to have to sort of set up the next set of conversations. One, I'd look at the leadership table, their meetings to be noticed to the commission, what the agenda is, and a debrief document that is reflective of the conversation that is also like publicly available. It sounds like in November we'll have this more data, but getting the census information for both deflection services and sobering. Again, we have resources. How are we optimizing them? I'm interested in the number of, now that we're a year into it, a number of individuals long-term who have had multiple deflections. So what is that telling us about the services? I would love to hear from the Pathway Center staff how we can better support them, what gaps they have, what challenges they're currently having, whether it's data, tools, engagement with other other departments or with other jurisdictional partners. I think that's going to be key. How can we best support them? I want to hear very specifically how the rest of the county departments are creating and supporting individuals who have a care plan beyond that 30 days. And this, I think, goes to Commissioner Singleton's comments also. I would be interested to know, is the county monitoring the care plan beyond 30 days? That's just a data point. Or is it we're done because they, under the current definition, at the end of the 30 days, have access a service no matter what it is. But is that being monitored? And I also want to look at this issue. It's a little bit of the multiple deflection, but understand longer term, the data of those who have been deflected. Are they interacting with law enforcement or the county and state judicial system in other ways? Not just around, are they being deflected multiple times, but are they actually maybe been deflected and then actually engaging, being engaged with the criminal justice system on other issues? I think that's an important data point that we have as well. I would recommend that, well, first I'll say, it's like, I think there's broad agreement that someone going to jail for use of a controlled substance is not the best place for them, nor is it the best place nor is it the best thing for the jail system, but that this is a real opportunity for us to get it right and find a better place that really does get people access to the services they need, because those aren't the services that they optimally would get in jail. We know that.
Thank you, Commissioner. I agree wholeheartedly with that sentiment. I think we all do. Just appreciate the time. I just want to give a real, you take this before we adjourn, just to thank the Health Department for all of their work on this. I mean, they have been incredibly thoughtful about this brand-new program, their role in it, how to set this up, how to engage, not just Turk House as the provider in the deflection, but our the whole, ecosystem of providers that are engaged in working in this. And I know we have some folks here, Natalie's not, but she's been doing amazing work on this. And so I just want to thank them. I mean, a lot of the things that have been brought up as questions or concerns or how do we do this are things that they have been thinking about. And also, the human-centered focus is something that I find our health department almost always brings to the work of that we do here at the county. And so I want to thank them for that. And then, and trying to think, for instance, for the permanent center, the fact that having withdrawal management built in, having a detox place built into a crisis stabilization and sobering center is going to help lead to better results for people. That is something that they really advocated for. And so I just want to appreciate them, and they're going to be, and I know they're interested and willing to really engage in this work and figure out how we can have better outcomes for our community, because that is the purpose of all we do. So thanks everyone for a really great discussion. That concludes today's regular board meeting. We're just really late, and I know some of us have stuff, but I just want to appreciate them. So there being no further business, we are adjourned.